The opponent expresses his praise to the hero, who worked hard to reach this place. He expresses his praise on behalf of the Demon King. As a reward, the rival is going to finish the guy off with his own hands. The hero will not allow this, because the faith of his friends gives him strength. Monster decides to see if the so-called power of friendship will work on him. In the end, the monster defeats the hero and considers his attempt to defeat the monster pathetic. The king kills the hero and continues his conquest. One of the monsters reports to the king about the hero's appearance. The king wants to say that the hero is already dead, when suddenly he notices something strange. The hero's body has turned into a skeleton, and his armor has disappeared. Suddenly, the hero appears alive and well with the intention of destroying the king. The king doesn't know how the hero turned it around, but he thinks that no matter how many times the hero comes, it will all be pointless. The king believes that he needs to build a tombstone to the end of despair, just for the sake of the hero. Suddenly, the hero begins to glow, turning into a ghost. It turns out the guy has a resurrection talisman. The king is shocked, because even for him, resurrection is not that easy. The hero says that his resurrection has not yet begun. He also says that he never looks down on his subordinates, unlike the Demon King. The king still intends to kill the hero before the boy's heart is destroyed. The hero damages the king and he doesn't understand how the guy keeps reviving. The king can think of nothing but to perceive all this as a nightmare. The hero says that the Demon King has come, of course, and cuts off his limb. The guy continues to destroy the king. The king falls to the ground, barely speaking. Despite his wounds, the king does not want to give up. On this day, the war ended, and not much time has passed since then. The hero returned to the capital, and killing the king became a great achievement. The end. The Demon King screams from his coffin that this is not the end. If the king hadn't locked his soul in an isolated vessel, he would have been destroyed. In any case, he now needs to figure out the situation. The king realizes that his soul has just tried to leave his body, when suddenly he hears a sound. Slime appears from the bushes. The king introduces himself to the slime and shows his power, but the slime doesn't seem to care and leaves. The king demands that the slime return, or he will beat it to death. The king reveals his second form, causing the slime to become scared and attack him. The king decides to fight back against the slime and squeezes it. The king fails, and the slime hits him in the face again. The Demon King is the leader who controls evil. He destroyed many countries and took over everything he wanted. Now the king can defeat even a small slime. He starts crying, and the slime takes pity on him. Suddenly, the king hears the slug's thoughts, and he calls him courageous. They talk, and eventually the slime decides that he and the king have become close friends. In honor of friendship, the slime tells the king about a magical river, and tells him to use this river to replenish his mana. The king doesn't have enough mana, but there is no more mana nearby to restore him. The king allows the slug to be his follower, and the conquest of the world begins again. The king and the slug escape from their pursuers. It turns out they stumbled upon monster hunters. Slime notes that for the king, running becomes a matter of life and death, since he moves using mana. The king realizes that his mana is running out and decides to attack. The king attacks the people, but they use the scroll. The scroll protects people from attack, and they remain unharmed. The king is shocked, and the people say that they did not feel the mana at all. The king called them cowards, and they began to attack. One of the people attacked the king, but the slime protected him. The slime kills the guys, causing the Demon King to be shocked. The slime digests one of the guys and wants the king to eat too. As a result, the friends get full, and the king considers the slime to be a very reliable subordinate. The king understands that if he is suddenly attacked again, he will not cope, and then the slime suggests that he disguise himself as a human. The king turns into a human, but the slime doesn't like his appearance. The Demon King changes his appearance to a female one, but the slime doesn't like it again. Eventually, the king goes through the images until he settles on a simple image of a guy. Slime decides that the next step is to find a costume. She also tells the king to come up with a backstory for himself, and while the boys were talking, a carriage pulled up to them. The king approaches the people from the cart and asks for help, telling a story about how his parents allegedly died and he himself escaped from the forest. The king asks to take him to the city, but the people decide to take him to sell him. The king runs away, but the people rush after him. Then the king takes his true form, believing that they will not pursue. People, seeing the king and the slime, understand that they will get even more money and start hunting them. The first thing they do is catch the slime. One of the guys stabs the demon and is about to smash it to pieces. Suddenly, someone attacks the man, saving the king. It turns out it's an orc. He doubts that now is the best time for people to go hunting. The king studies his savior and is surprised to realize that he is an orc. The orc asks if the demon was also attacked by humans and explains that there are more and more humans, and this place is becoming safe for demons. The orc offers the king to go to his village and calls him a knuckle. The king explains that he is the king of demons, but the orc does not believe him, perceiving his words as a desire to become the same as the king. The king asks the monster if he is some kind of orc, to which he introduces himself as a Highlander and decides to tell about the types of orcs. The monster says that the Highlands are mostly a species that lives in mountainous areas. The difference between the Highlands and the orcs is their green skin. Highland talks about the different types of orcs and says that there are many more species. Finally, they reach the village. The king thinks that everything in the village is somehow primitive. Okur tells his people about his encounter with a demon. The orcs think that the demon has a lot of ambition, since he wants to become like the demon king. Meanwhile, the king is shocked that his words are not taken seriously. The orcs begin to discuss the king's loss to the hero, which results in a blow to the king. The king tries to justify himself, assuring the orcs that the demon king was simply taking care of them. As a result, the king and the slime run away. The king runs away into the forest and realizes that being him is much harder than he thought. He pushes these thoughts away, realizing that he has already stopped being a king and decides that it is not worth thinking about what cannot be changed. The king understands that as long as you win, you don't have to worry about anything. He saw nothing but his victories, and eventually died because of his own selfishness. The king is thinking about what the ideal demon king should be like, when suddenly an orc appears. The orc brought the boys something to eat. The king was surprised and asked if the orc wanted to eat his skull, to which he replied that he had enough bones. The orc asks why the king ran away, to which he says that it is difficult to explain. The orc decides that the king needs help to understand himself and recommends him a good specialist. He says that she is very good and smart and also lives in an elven village, which horrifies the king. The king asks a question about the relationship between the orcs and the elves, in response to which the orc explains the misunderstandings. The orc says that the youths from his village want to go to the elven village as teachers, and asks if the king would like to go with them. The king agrees to go and decides that this will be his first step. The orc offers him something to eat, because the king completely forgot to finish his skull. The king feels uneasy, realizing that something is definitely wrong with the boys. The pumped-up orcs ask the king with smiles what's wrong with them. The orc says that they are very hardy and need a lot of subcutaneous fat for energy. He also says that they are ready to do anything for their muscles. The orc believes that the elves will be strained by the king's bones instead of hands, and he decides to change. Suddenly, a sound is heard, and the orc says that it is the call of their leader. The king thinks that the trainer of these orcs is probably very obsessed with sports. Finally, they are there, and it is very hot here, as in hell. There are rivers of lava on the spot. The orcs say that their leader is hotter. Suddenly, a huge monster appears. He is several times larger than the king and the orcs, and appears to be made of lava. The king is shocked and realizes that the orc trainer does not look like an orc at all. The trainer hands the king a dumbbell, and he asks why he needs it. The trainer steps back a bit, and begins the first lesson. He tells the king to watch his movements carefully and repeat. Slime suggests that the king try, and the king decides to try. The trainer shows the movements, and the king repeats. The king feels tired in his hand and understands that his magic will not help here. The king tries hard despite his fatigue, because he does not want to disgrace himself. As a result, the king's hand becomes jammed, and he cannot raise it. The king says he can't do it anymore, and the coach reaches out to him. The king is scared at first, but the trainer just helps him take the dumbbell. He also says that the king is strong, and he only has 3 more times left. The coach decides to help the king and motivates him with his friends. The coach asks the king to do it 3 more times, and eventually the king succeeds. The king continues to lift the dumbbell, and everyone supports him. Finally, the king finishes, and everyone congratulates him. Now the trainer offers him the same training, but on the other hand, the king refuses, but eventually his left hand also falls off. The coach says that the king looks like someone he knows, and for the first time in a long time he greeted him properly. The king realizes that he was afraid all this time because of a misunderstanding. The coach says that the king looks like his friend, and he decides that the world is big and that this is possible. The king asks the coach who he is. The coach says he would be happy if the guys called him Gwen. Gwen gets cold and goes into the lava to warm up. The orcs explain that when Gwen freezes, he can't speak properly. They tell the trainer that they are going to the elf village and ask him to make sure Gwen is ready. The orcs are happy and say that their leader is a spirit to whom they should aspire. The king wonders about the name of the monster and its level. The king cannot understand what is so special about the level and understands that rank is not everything. Slime says that being able to lift something heavy doesn't make someone amazing. Strengths and weaknesses are just something to assign a position to. Slime offers to drink to the orcs and trainers muscles and tells the king not to be upset. The king felt something touch him, but the slime felt nothing. The slime assumed it was ash, but the king claimed it felt stronger. As a result, the king and the others go to the elf village. The guys are all running somewhere. The king can no longer run, unlike the others. He is also surprised that the slime runs fast. The king says that the slime doesn't look like slime. He also asks the slime not to rush. Gwen runs faster and says he needs to push harder while his muscles are hot. Finally, the boys arrive at the elf village. The guys are met by an elf and greeted. Someone is training, and Gwen demands to use all his strength. It turns out that a bunch of elves are training to lose weight. The king imagined the elves to be slimmer. The king asks if they can get away quickly, and the elf decides to show them the village. It turns out they are under the village, but despite this, it is unusually bright here, and there are even windows. The girl throws some paper into the air, and it turns into a lantern. The elf says that in the summer they use air conditioners, and because of this, there is little light. The king is surprised at the development of the elves. The girl says that the master of innovations created most of their useful tools. The king is surprised and realizes that his weakness is clearer than it seems, so he wants to strengthen his strength. The king asks if the master of innovations can strengthen his staff. The girl is not sure and suggests going to the master. The master greets them haughtily and says that improving the staff is as easy as pie for him. In the end, the master tried, but judging by the results, it is impossible to improve the staff. He also asks the king where he got the staff. Usually you can tell the type of wood the staff is made of, but the wood the staff is made of no longer exists on Earth. The king asks what this means, and the elf explains the craftsman also says that the staff has a seal on it. The master asks where the king got the staff from, but he plays dumb and says he doesn't remember. The king ponders his birth, and suddenly his soul disappears. The body falls, and the slime jumps off in time. The elves are shocked, and the king sits down on the slime and says that he just lost consciousness for a moment. The master notes that it seems that the staff is connected to the king's existence and asks him to remember something. The king says that the staff can use high-level magic. He also says that they escaped from a desperate situation using magic. All the magic that the king can use is old. The master realizes that the story is becoming more complicated. Suddenly, one of the elves bursts in and shouts that something has happened to Hamlet's grandmother. An orc and an elf arrive at some clearing. The orc says that this is his favorite place and shows a beautiful view of a flower meadow. The elf is surprised by the beauty, and the orc says that you can't sit alone and be sad. He also asks how the elf feels. The girl says that she is already old, and because of this, it is becoming difficult for her to walk, but that is why the orc brought the bed. The girl thinks the orc is funny. The girl shows him magic and the orc is delighted. Ochre asks the girl to show more magic, and in the meantime, Hamlet watches them from afar. It turns out that this elf is the guy's grandmother, and apparently she is having a lot of fun. The orc drags the bed to all the places, showing them to the girl. The girl is delighted and very happy. Hamlet notices that the granny and the orc have become very talkative. The girl tells a story about how she was in the war. She also says that watching the world for thousands of years is not fun. The girl thinks that she is indulging in too many memories and suggests that the orc go to that place again. Hamlet, in tears, asks the orc to do this, or he will never forgive him. The orc agrees, and he and Granny go to the land of memories. Granny remembers that the last time she went outside was a long time ago. And finally, the couple comes to the flower field. It is not obvious from the girl that she is dying, because the body does not age, but the soul wears out. It becomes difficult for her to do something, and to do what she likes is even more difficult. The king asks what happened, and the boy says that he joined the army to raise money and show his grandmother to the doctor. He eventually found a doctor and tried to return to the village. Hamlet says that he could do nothing, and it was at that time that the Demon King had to start the war. Hamlet begins to cry when he mentions his grandmother. Slime notices that the king is depressed, and the king regrets losing the war. He wonders what would have happened if he had won. Slime says that in case of winning something is lost, this is war. The death of monsters is commonplace and inevitable. Slime says that every corpse has a story, and each of them is stained with blood. Slime also asks why the king wants to become king. Slime asks what the king is thinking, who he will give life to, and what he will do. This is where the Demon King's introductory chapter begins. Slime says that the king can see more than what is written. The king can't wait to see what happens next. The king decides to help with the elf's funeral and tells Gwen about it. He says in response that he was going to help too. The elves give the king a task of what needs to be done and brought. After doing tasks all day, the king realized that funerals are an act of love. At a funeral, everyone comes together, and no one dies alone. The king notices the house and asks why the light is always on. The elf explains that this is Taneka's workshop, and explains about the cremation of elves. The elf says that the primordial fire is the progenitor of all fire, but no one knows how to light it. Therefore, the master wants to get closer to the original fire. The ceremony is approaching, and the slime says that it is worried, but the king says that he will not interfere. The boys come to the master and realize that everything seems to be almost ready. Since the boy himself is sleeping at the table, the king reaches out to wake the boy, since he is muttering something in his sleep. The funeral ceremony begins. The boy says goodbye to his grandmother, because now the sky is her new home. He can't stand it and starts crying, not knowing how to live without his grandmother. Hamlet asks for forgiveness for not being able to do anything. The boy cannot cure his grandmother's illness, but he will study a lot. Hamlet doesn't want his grandmother to be buried, and thinks it would be nice to spend a little more time together. The guy blames himself for not being able to do anything. Suddenly the boy notices the primeval fire and wonders where it came from. The king says that it is his fire. The one who started the war has become so sentimental, and the one who laughed yesterday is turning into a mass of meat. This must be what oblivion is, and what moves people's minds. The king is still dying and needs mana, but despite this he wants to do something to help. The king mentally asks the hero if he knew what the monsters really were, he would still kill them. Gwen helps the boys carry the luggage. The king asks if it's a good idea to go and trade in another village, to which the elf says that they need to earn money to pay for the funeral. The elf believes that at such moments it is better to do work than to be sad, and asks the king if he has learned the secret of the staff. Hamlet gives the king a silver wand and a guide ring. Since the king's staff is sealed, he can use this for now. The ring allows you to know the state of the seal on the staff. The seal can break unexpectedly, and the elf has a bad feeling. He says he can strengthen the seal, but the king refuses, saying that sooner or later they will still face it. Meanwhile, the holy knights begin the cleansing. The squad consists of 5 knights: Jiril, Enfia, Vincari, Artemilia, and Kazodi. Several years have passed since the Demon King's death and the monsters have dispersed, allowing humans to regain their strength. Enfi suggests attacking from different directions. The guy says that they need to gather soldiers. Kazodi asks why there is no 6th saint. Jiril notes that his grandfather is always silent, and also that he is the only one of the saints who cooperated in the destruction of the Demon King. The girl says that the hero is a lion running forward, and Enfil thanks her for the love story, which confuses the girl. Fire lion, he's in his element. 2 guys realize that the hero is getting out of control, since he hasn't done anything since the destruction of the Demon King. The girl tells the guy to let off some steam, otherwise he will soon turn to witches. The guy says that for the sake of his son he will kill any creature. Meanwhile, the hero in the cloak is going somewhere. He believes that this world has its own secret. The king asks how many monsters there are in the village, and the elf replies that there are enough. Suddenly someone calls out to the boys. 4 strange people stand in their way, asking if the guys know whose territory they are on. The king asks who this goblin is, and the slime replies that they consider this territory theirs. Meanwhile, the boys come closer to the king and the elf. Hamlet says that he is just a merchant, but the guys think that the guys want to get into the village. The king holds a blade to the neck of one of the guys and says that he is not a man. The boy agrees with the king, and the slime asks if they can go now. The boys were joined by their leader, who asks for forgiveness for causing the king and the elf inconvenience. The leader introduces himself as the blade of the village and asks to be called boss. The boss asks the king who he is, and the king introduces himself as Ignis, the leader who controls evil. The elf finds the king's greeting strange and says that they just came to trade. To everyone's surprise, the boss recognizes the elf. The boys immediately ask Hamlet for forgiveness for their disrespect. The boss apologizes for the inconvenience and offers to see the guys off. The boys come to the place and see something high in front of them. The boss says that in times like these they must be ready for anything. It turns out that the village is surrounded by a high wall and looks almost like a castle. Gamlen is surprised and asks if such high walls are really necessary, to which the boss replies that it is all because of the people. The guys enter the village and are surprised. The king wants to look around and asks where the queen is. A snake-like girl appears, scolding the boss for bringing new monsters. The girl explains that now is a time of crisis, and she cannot let everyone into the village. Suddenly, someone appears and, interrupting the girl, tells the guests to stay. It turns out to be a horse on a horse, which is why the king is shocked. The horse says that Tarak's guests are his guests too. The girl apologizes to the guests and asks why they came. They all start talking at once, and the girl asks them to tell in turn. Slime says that the girl is very smart, to which she agrees and says that the guys can ask her about anything. The king asks why only the main gate is made of stone, and the girl answers. The king asks if the village will attract attention by building something so huge, to which the girl says there is nothing to worry about. The girl mentions blue eyes, and the king asks for more details. The girl also talks about her sister's strength, and says that she is the best sister in the world. The king says he looks forward to meeting her sister. The boys come to the queen, who has just finished her business, and the girl immediately throws herself into her sister's arms. The queen calls the king a knucklebone, which angers him. The queen asks what he wants from her. The king asks the queen to examine his staff and tells her to be careful. The girl begins to examine the staff and suddenly magic appears. The king is surprised, not understanding what kind of magic it is. The queen is very surprised by something. The queen asks what kind of staff it is, and says that it is not normal. The king wants to know what the girl saw, to which she says that she felt different. She felt a power, as if from another dimension. The girl says that she felt something like this 1,000 years ago. She didn't hear or see anything, the same power came from this staff. The girls ask if Ignis knows the first demon king. They explain that his power is unmatched, and his eyes are connected to heaven and earth. Suddenly a stone falls into the king's hand and he asks about it. An earthquake begins and the slime tells him to get out of here. It turns out that the village was attacked by knights. The king goes into shock for a second, then attacks the attacking knight. The queen is shocked and does not understand where the people came from. She does not know what to do when suddenly the knight attacks her. The king and slime save the queen. The knight attacks. The queen doesn't understand how this could have happened, and the king explains that they tore down the main gate. Alicia tells everyone to evacuate. The queen pulls herself together and tells her to follow her sister's instructions. The boss appears and asks if the queen is okay. He also says that he will take care of everything and asks her to run. The queen has no idea what is going on here, but is glad that her friends are okay. They explain to her that the humans sent knights after the monsters and that they destroyed the gate. The situation is bad, but the king says that now they must turn it around in their favor. The boss tells Ignis to get lost, as he is just a guest. Ignis says that he can never escape from war and thinks that is exactly what the king would say. He asks the boss if they are going to give up. Now the battle is in the hands of the monsters, and they decide to act. The king offers his actions for the attack. The boss says that the humans have the advantage in numbers and equipment. He also asks if the king has experience leading the people. Ignis decides that he will fight, no matter the pain and blood, together with the monsters. People attack, but to their surprise, the monsters do not give up and attack back. Ignis is skilled at dealing with people. He instructs the monsters to defend themselves from the spears. Ignis also gives other instructions to buy time. The boss invites the fearless to go against him. People understand that things are changing, and they don't understand what the hell is going on. Monsters and humans have been fighting for quite some time now, and Ignis is running out of strength. Suddenly the knights attack the king, but they come to his aid. The king realizes that reinforcements are coming through the main gate. He kills the knight, and the slime praises him. Ignis says that the force will be on their side when the flood comes. Slime is not sure that they will be able to hold out. A boss appears, who apparently successfully dealt with the knights. The boss is informed about the airlock breakdown and is offered to send the trolls into battle, but Ignis refuses, saying that they have work to do. The monsters understand that their plan has been revealed and everything is working out in favor of the people, but the king cannot allow this. Gwen enters the battle. Slime comes to the king and says that he has completed the task. The king understands that the time has come and tells everyone to disperse. People do not understand why the demons retreat and decide that they must be finished off. They are eager to fight. People start running after Ignis. Suddenly, a wave is directed at people, causing them to go into shock. They don't have time to escape, and the wave washes people away. The king decides that it is over, when suddenly he hears women's screams. It turns out that the wave has captured Alicia and the queen. The king uses magic and tells the girls to grab onto it. Suddenly the roof beneath the king collapses, and he falls into the water. The king woke up from a noise somewhere in a dark room with bars. The king notices that the queen's crown has been taken away, and she demands that it be returned, but the people say that it will be a gift for their king. The girl demands the crown back, but the king interrupts her, saying that it looks like they are not going to kill them yet. The queen hopes that her sister is okay. The king notices that they are in a cage, but the queen asks where Ignis' voice is coming from. The king realizes that the girl is blind. The girl says that because of magic her senses have become dull, and her vision has been lost since birth. Ignis understands that the crown compensates for the girl's shortcomings, and she says that the crown is special to her. The queen says that because of her illness, she was always sitting at home, and her sister studied hard to help her. For the sake of the queen, she made a magical prosthetic eye, and this was the first time the queen saw her sister. After that, the queen became more cheerful and changed. Gradually, she got to know everyone and joined the group. The prosthesis and the decorations were handmade, and the queen received more and more decorations. Everyone complimented her. The king can't find the words to cheer up the girl. It's hard for him when it comes to anything other than war. But the slime decides to help him. The king is surprised and asks the slime how long he has been here. The slime asks him not to make noise, and the people to shout at the demons to shut up. Slime says that it was difficult to find the king, but in the end he did. Slime also helped the king not to die. The slime says that he didn't have time to escape, so he hid in the king's collar. The king praises the slime and asks him to turn into a key. The king tells the queen that the slime is in the cage with them and can be turned into a key. In an empty room there is a crown and jewelry on the table. The unknown man leaves the room saying that the victim had a beautiful expression at the end. He looks forward to meeting his sister, and behind him remains a snake-like corpse. Before getting to the main point, the monsters have a problem. They don't know where the exit from the cage is. Slime thinks that this is quite a big problem. Although the design of the base seems primitive, from a distance it looks quite impressive. Ignis finds it strange that things are developing so quickly. He assumes that the people are preparing to accept someone from above. The king says that if they look for a way out, they won't find it right away. They have too little information to save themselves. The girl realizes that if they find out where the base is, they can deal with it. She also says that the slime could remove the sealing bracelet, which would be a big help to them. The slime helps remove the bracelets, and the queen uses tracking magic. Magic runs through all the rooms of the camp. As a result, the queen is given a map of the camp. Now she knows what to do, and Ignis is surprised that it all took her an instant. The girl decides to draw a simple map for the guys. The king understands that they will have to flee unarmed, but the queen wants the crown back. She asks if the king has figured out the map, to which Ignis says he can think of something. The king tells the plan of action. He also says that there are many places to hide at the base, and the darkness is only to their advantage. Slime grows legs for running. The guys decide to go to one of the buildings, the shortest way. The king says that they are unarmed until they reach the building, but as soon as they get their weapons, it's the end for the people. The guys set off to get out of here. The guys move very quickly and try not to make noise. The king stops his friends and says that he will conduct reconnaissance before going. He releases his eye for reconnaissance. The eye turns on the branch mode and turns into a monster. The eye runs the branch once and tells the guys that everything is clear. The eye says that it found something, which scares the slime because it didn't think that the eye could talk. The king returns the eye back. The guys easily reach the building and are going to act according to the plan. Slime says he will help, and the king asks him not to lose his vigilance. The guys enter the building. There are a lot of things in the room, and the guys start looking for the crown. The wooden boxes are tightly packed, which makes the queen nervous. The king is surprised by how many things people took from the monsters. He understands that at the time when he was resting on a mountain of treasures, he was standing on a mountain of corpses. Slime finds the king's staff, but the queen's crown is nowhere to be found. The girl panics, saying that they don't have time, and searches everything. Slime suggests using tracking, but the room is under a spell that interferes with the girl. Also, there is a wizard nearby who can track monsters by their magic. The king suggests using reverse tracking magic. They can trace the strong interference that the room hidden from the monsters will emit. The girl agrees and uses magic. She quickly finds the right room. The queen has a strange feeling, but the guys still enter the room. The girl finds her crown and happily puts it on. Finally, the queen can see. The king offers the queen to track the location of her sister. Ignis says that he will go with the queen and she uses tracking magic. The girl is happy because it seems her sister is in the same building. The king asks her to hurry and find her sister. They approach the right room and the queen says that she must show her sister what a good older sister she is. The room turns out to be dark and the king smells a scent. He also stumbles upon a familiar bracelet and asks the queen not to turn on the light yet. The girl turned on the light and saw her sister chained to the wall with multiple wounds. The guys are in shock, and the queen doesn't believe what's happening. She is hysterical and can't believe that this is true. The girl hysterically collects her sister's scales. The king understands that things are bad. The queen insists that her sister is still alive and that she will fix everything. She insists that her magic will bring her sister back. But alas, this is not so. The king notes that the scales look as if they were forcibly removed. The girl says that her sister was tortured for only 1 day. The queen goes crazy and says that there is no forgiveness for people. She starts screaming in rage. Her scream echoes throughout the camp. She begins to destroy everything around her. The girl is determined to kill everyone. The queen, in a rage, permits and burns everything around her. The king asks her to calm down, reminding her that they are in the middle of a human base. He reminds her that their original goal is to escape. The girl does not listen to him, and the king understands that he cannot convince her. He understands that her magic is out of control and can kill her. The king decides to take action and uses sacrifice. He absorbs the queen's magic, and the slime notices that the seal on the staff has begun to glow. Ignis doesn't care about the seal. The main thing now is to calm the queen. The friends understand that if they don't finish quickly, they themselves might die. Ignis assures the queen that she must live. He says that her sister would not want her to die. It's okay to be angry, but the girl shouldn't die. Slime notices that there are more people. Ignis tells the guys to leave, but he decides to stay. The king says he has absorbed too much of the queen's magic, and people can track them by that magic. The king reminds the slime of the words about strengths and weaknesses that he spoke. Ignis says that he seems to have found his own. He teleports the slime and the queen away and heads off into battle. The king uses magic to create an explosion and an earthquake, which frightens people. People are told that demons may be on the loose and are ordered to prepare. The king uses his power and transforms. Now he decides to use his power for the good of his people. His patience came to an end. Ignis tells people that he is evil, fear, and rage. He is the one who will unite the demons at the end of time, and his name is the Demon King Ignis. The king intends to erect a tombstone on the graves of these people. Meanwhile, a guy wakes up in the tent and hears about the demons that got out. He begins to gather himself, preparing to fight the demon. Slime does not understand why the king is so reckless, and thinks why he should pretend to be someone he is not. The slime thinks the king is a fool, and meanwhile he fights with the people. Ignis makes quick work of a large number of people. But people are not going to give up and continue to attack. Ignis demands that they bow their heads and uses force to make them kneel. He towers over people, calling them little bugs. The king realizes that if he does not use magic carefully, the energy will quickly run out. He decides that he must hurry. He starts throwing logs from the fence at people. The king uses chaos magic and the technique of the Eternals. He impales people on stakes in one fell swoop. Ignis quickly deals with several and says that it is not difficult, which scares the others. The leader of the people demands not to retreat, and the king says that this man is brave since he is not afraid of him. It turns out that this brave man is the general of this base. The general assures the king that he will torture him and then make a carpet out of him. He says that torturing monsters is pure pleasure. The general uses flame spear magic. He goes to attack, but Ignis is faster. As a result, the general flies off and crashes into the tower. He does not give up and gets up, starting to attack the king. Unfortunately for him, the king does not allow himself to be attacked. Ignis warns the boy that he won't be able to defeat him. The guy says that it was magic, which is even difficult to pronounce. He starts to run away and Ignis thinks that he got scared. It turns out that the general ran back a distance to attack. He attacks the king to blind him, but it doesn't work. In the end, the general uses a magic circle. It turns out the guy used a spear to draw a magic circle. The king notes that the spell is powerful and can destroy not only him, but the entire base. The general casts a spell to destroy the demon. A huge spear appears from the sky from a magic circle. The spear attacks the king, severely wounding him. The general thinks that now the king is finished, but the king is not yet ready to die. The king's limbs fall off and Ignis himself is transformed. He takes on another demonic form and tells the general that he is still alive. The guy starts attacking again, now angry at the king. The general attacks the king, but he runs away without letting himself be hit. The guy thought that using force would quickly end everything, but it turned out not to be so. The general calls the soldier and says that they must take the king away from here. He divides the tasks, some lure the king into a trap, and the rest put out the fire. The general begins a wolf hunt. He begins to attack the king. Ignis jumps back and starts to run away, but the general runs after him. The king uses advanced techniques and doubts that the boy will be able to catch up with him. Suddenly, knights appear on his path, blocking his way. The general catches up from behind and attacks, but the king dodges in time. The knights also prevent the king from passing by poking him with their spears. They strike the king, but he tells them not to be arrogant and attacks back. The king begins to tease the general, dodging his attacks. The knight and the general strike Ignis. Eventually, the king picks up the knight and throws him at the general, knocking them both down. The general goes berserk. The king notes that the general is smarter than he thought. In the king's opinion, the general is a man who turns ordinary people into elites, and fighting on his territory is too unprofitable. In the end, the king runs away, and the general decides to go after him. He gives the knight the task of putting out the fire.
Silence fell over the reinforced wooden wall until a sudden explosion tore through the decking, shattering it into splinters. Debris flew into the air, indicating a powerful blow had breached the defenses. One of the warriors struck the enemy with force, breaking the wooden structure and raising a cloud of splinters. The warrior screamed and charged forward, striking from above with his blade while riding on horseback. His target, a huge, heavily armored foe, took the blow, sending up dust and flying rocks. The man continued to attack his opponent furiously, striking again with a shout. The latter watched the events with indifference and called the enemy's attempts stupid, showing no concern even after a strong blow. The armored creature considered that its magical body would not be able to withstand the strain for long. It understood that running away would lead to an attack from behind and therefore was pointless. In response, the man with the spear calmly stated that only one of them could survive. The demon rushed forward, determined not to make a single mistake in the fight. The warrior with the spear prepared for the clash. The demon understood that there could only be one outcome, either victory or death. The clash happened instantly, and the spears crossed with a crash. The warrior struck with a powerful cry, pressing the enemy. In response, the creature tried to parry the attack with a whip. But the man with the shield desperately maintained his balance. The demon mentally begged himself not to fall, knowing that this would mean the end. The man screamed and brought down a powerful blow from above, shouting a threat. At this time, the enemy tried to use a weapon with a chain, but before the explosion could be heard, the armor took the force of the attack. The warrior breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that the battle was over and the enemy was defeated. However, the mask suddenly appeared again from the smoke and destruction, which caused him surprise and wariness. The black liquid stirred again, and a demonic figure rose from it, calmly saying that the enemy had made a mistake. The armored warrior froze with his sword in his hand, realizing that the fight was not over yet. The horned, masked creature slowly rose from the clouds of darkness, unharmed and calm. It calmly declared that everything that had happened so far was only the beginning of the real battle. The man laughs, saying he was tricked like a child. He looks relaxed and takes the whole thing ironically. The warrior continues, stating that the demon does not look like a monster, but rather resembles a fish skeleton. A man in furs and armor stands nearby, noting that this day has been full of surprises. He says that at first it was a snake that seemed like a terrible threat, and now he sees a skeletal clown. The demon was silent for a while, then calmly said that he was talking about Lamino, addressing his interlocutor. The warrior in furs reacted with surprise to what he heard, not expecting that the enemy could know the demon Yuga he was thinking about. The warrior told how they had accidentally captured the demoness not far from the fort. He admitted that interrogating her was fun for him, especially when he began torturing her for information. Then he added that she had bitten off her tongue just to keep from giving anything away. The man recalled with a sadistic grin how he slowly tortured the demoness, enjoying her suffering. He said that he started with the tail, cutting it off piece by piece, then he peeled off her skin and cauterized the wounds until the instrument itself was charred. He especially enjoyed breaking such victims from the inside. He went on to tell how, having enjoyed her torment, he decided to do her a favor. He recalled with a grin how she jumped up and down on him, each time screaming the same words in despair. The warrior looked at his opponent with a contemptuous grin and told him to show him something if he could. He called him a knuckle, challenging him. The demon looked at the demon and called on him to join the battle and burn with him in the cycle of life and death. He declared that there were no spectators in this world. The masked demon raised his weapon, and a furious energy flared around him. He calmly declared that now the man would suffer, emphasizing the beginning of retribution. The warrior stood in the very center of the raging flames and mockingly asked if this was the enemy's entire secret plan. He noted with a slight grin that the heat, although felt, did not cause him any harm, and then added that this flame was not even able to burn him. The demon, standing amidst the raging flames, calmly stated that he understood the enemy's intentions. He assumed that he was just trying to buy time, and immediately added that he knew the reason why this was happening. The warrior, standing in the circle of flames with a sword in his hands, mockingly suggested that this whole undertaking was just an attempt to buy time. He asked with a grin if this was all so that their queen could escape. The man glared at the demon and promised not to let him use any tricks. He added with disdain that he would smash his skull and then use it as a wine cup. The demon, looking at the approaching enemy, coldly said that it was his arrogance that would lead to his death. The warrior struck the demon hard, sending him flying backwards with a powerful thrust. He tried to react, but the attack was too fast. The two then clashed in a fierce battle, exchanging blows at close range, while the warrior's face was filled with rage and concentration. The demon was surprised to feel the force of the blow, and admitted that he could not even stand on his feet. The difference in power was greater than he expected. The warrior, on the other hand, with a furious cry, rushed into battle, laughing and mocking the enemy, saying that he fought like a woman. Despite the enemy's strength, he did not intend to retreat and continued to attack. The warrior abruptly parried the attack and screamed loudly, not allowing the enemy to complete the blow. The demon thought tensely of the chaos demons, as if he suddenly realized what he was dealing with. The demon's sword could not withstand the blow and split with a crash, flying into pieces. The demon watched in amazement as pieces of his mask broke off from the blow and fell to the ground with a crash. His gaze was frozen in mute amazement at the sudden and powerful breach of his defense. During the fierce battle, the demon was wounded, but showed no surprise, quietly admitting that he had expected such an outcome. The man mentally noted that the fun would not last long. The warrior understood that catching his enemy off guard was his only chance. He rushed forward with the determination to deliver the decisive blow and tipped the battle in his favor. The demon noticed a vulnerability in his opponent and realized that this was his chance. He decided that the moment the warrior raised his shield, he would strike into the open area. His attention was drawn to a small hole, quite narrow, but quite suitable for the blade. The warrior accused his opponent of playing dirty. He said that it was not enough and rushed to attack. However, his blow was parried, and the opponent confidently declared that he would not succeed, and the fight was not over yet. The man barely managed to cover himself, but the blow reached its target. His face was distorted with pain when the weapon fragment pierced his defense and caused a serious wound. He noticed that the enemy had decided to use his horn as a weapon. However, he immediately stated that this was not enough for him. He admitted that the warrior was already dead to him from the moment he stood before him, and added that he should not be upset. The warrior screamed out a call for vengeance and rage. Believing that every blow dealt brought the reckoning closer, he rushed forward, with his weapon pointed straight at his enemy. The man slashed with his sword, causing the demon to retreat under the force of the blow. The ground cracked under the pressure, and the blow struck the mask, splitting it and causing it to jerk backwards. He launched a powerful attack in mid-air, and the demon tried to cover himself with a shield. The mask cracked from the blow, but the enemy immediately counterattacked, slamming a powerful fist with a magical sign straight into the ground, creating a blast wave. The warrior threw the enemy back with a powerful blow and immediately rushed forward, not allowing him to recover. The demon barely managed to stay on his feet, but his mask was already badly damaged. One of the blows hit its target, deep cracks appeared on its surface, and blood splashed half of his face. The demon dropped to one knee, barely keeping his balance. The enemy's sword froze in front of his face, looming menacingly over him. The warrior struck, breaking through the demon's defenses and piercing him through. The demon screamed in pain as the blade's tip passed through his chest, flames raging behind him. The man said that now his opponent must understand that he is weak. He emphasized that even tricks could not ensure his victory, because he was superior. Then he contemptuously called the enemy a clown, adding that he had fallen to the very bottom. The demon demanded that the enemy shut up and fight. He warned that he was going to burn him alive and make him the first person to be burned by his powers. After making sure that he did not react, he asked again if the enemy could hear him. The warrior stood up with his sword pointed upward and loudly declared that he would not allow the enemy to pass. A powerful explosion of light erupted above him, as if he was erecting a barrier in his path. He noticed that their flames were identical and said so out loud. He noted that it was quite obvious while the fierce battle continued in the background. The skull-faced creature screamed as an explosion of light and power engulfed the figure in the center of the battlefield, sending debris and dust flying from the shockwave. A column of smoke and energy rose into the sky as runestones emerged from the ash clouds. The skull-faced creature did not hide its fury and screamed, not holding back its anger. The demon muttered that the fire would not be able to pass. He noticed that the flame of his opponent was the same as his. Then he heard as the enemy calmly asked what it would say to this. The man with the raised weapon addressed his opponent, standing in front of many flaming spheres. He calmly asked him what he thought about it. The demon looked at the approaching magic sphere with a tense expression. He swung his sword sharply, trying to block the attack. Huge debris continued to fall from the sky as the axe-wielding warrior stood amidst the destruction. He confidently declared that the enemy had certainly been destroyed, adding that he hoped that was exactly the result his opponent had been seeking. The demon emerged from the clouds of smoke and calmly declared that the first part of the show was over. Then he suggested that they begin the second. The demon clutched the staff and said that it was now his turn to act. His gaze remained piercing as the shards flew around. The man said that he was tired of listening to his opponent's meaningless speeches and ordered him to stop immediately. The warrior rushed forward without hesitation, swinging his sword. With a powerful blow, he plunged the blade into the enemy, shouting the order to die. The man loomed over his opponent, crushing him with a blow from above. He coldly stated that his enemy was inferior to him in both strength and tactics, adding that no amount of trickery would change anything. The demon coldly stated that the enemy was inferior to him in both strength and tactics, adding that no tricks would change anything. The demon came close and reminded the warrior of his own words about the difference in levels. He couldn't believe his eyes, realizing that he was in a vulnerable position. The enemy uttered the spell name Primordial Explosion, preparing to deliver the decisive blow. The warrior cried out in confusion as the demon cast the spell, dissolve the flesh, and explode. The next moment, power began to concentrate below, and soon a massive explosion occurred, engulfing the warrior at the epicenter. The warrior gasped for breath and admitted that he had been taken by surprise, but added that it would not change anything. Gathering his strength, he struck with all his might, shouting for his enemy to die. The man looked at the explosion site in shock, not understanding what had happened. The enemy stood calmly among the clouds of smoke, as if he had prepared for the attack in advance. The demon hiding in the smoke noted that the blow had not reached its target. He explained that the attack had been successfully stopped by a wall of fire. The armored warrior seemed to understand the situation and acknowledged what had been said. The demon stated that the protective wall was not powerful enough to contain even the outer layers of his flames. He suggested that the enemy take a closer look, hinting at a hidden threat. The armored warrior became wary, not immediately understanding what was being discussed. The demon explained that from the very beginning of the battle, he had merged with the enemy's flames in order to subjugate them. He claimed that the flame, called the primordial, devours everything else, and that from the moment the fort was set on fire, he had continued to control this fire until now. The masked being standing against the raging flames raised his weapon and declared that he was now in control of the fire. Across the battlefield, his opponent continued to watch the proceedings. The figure standing against the flaming wall calmly explained that the enemy had previously only dealt with one fire sphere. Now the full force of the fire would fall upon him, and he would no longer be able to win. The warrior watched the scene with obvious tension, thinking that the mixing of fire was beyond the scope of ordinary magic. He admitted that everything had become clear at that moment, but it no longer mattered. The man stood with a confident smile, clutching his weapon and making it clear that despite the circumstances, he was not going to give up. The demon noted that he had a worthy opponent in front of him, and said that he considered him a fine guy. He expressed confidence that he understood his motives and proudly mentioned his status as one of the 6 saints. Then he raised his hand as if he was going to show off his true strength. A huge column of energy crashed down to the ground, causing a massive explosion and sending up a cloud of ash and debris. One of the combatants was caught in the middle of the attack, but he remained standing despite the destructive force that rained down on him. The armored warrior screamed desperately, claiming that he was one of the 6 saints and that no one could defeat him. He tried to resist the force of the explosion, but his figure dissolved in the blinding flames that carried his body upward, along with the other silhouettes engulfed in flames. The man found himself drawn into a seething whirlwind from which his screams were heard. The demon, watching what was happening, noticed that it felt as if the air was being torn out of the body. He explained that this was the Queen's fury, inviting his companion to taste it. The warrior, engulfed in flames, rushed forward, shouting an oath to avenge every fallen foe. He claimed that for every enemy killed, he would destroy 10, and for every 100, 1,000. Introducing himself as a fiery lion named Vargos, he declared that he would never retreat. One of the combatants quietly said farewell words, clutching his staff. His body gradually began to crumble into ash, starting from his feet and rising upwards, as if he was disappearing, leaving behind only emptiness and smoke. Out of the fire and smoke emerged a charred figure in armor, almost completely destroyed, but still standing. Those who watched this looked at the figure in silence, and one of them admitted that it was finally all over. The demon stood in the ashes, trying to catch his breath, barely able to stand on his feet. He felt his body refusing to obey him, and he couldn't even move a finger. Meanwhile, heavy footsteps began to approach from the clouds of smoke, announcing that the battle was not yet over. The warrior, clad in black armor, confidently declared that the flames could not harm him, because he himself was the embodiment of fire. The next moment, he rushed forward with fury, striking with a blinding flash. The dark figure raised his sword, but at the moment of impact, the blade cracked and shattered into pieces. The fragments of the weapon flew to the sides, reflecting the sudden weakness in the once formidable attack. The wounded fighter stood with difficulty on his feet, looking at the cracked weapon in his hand. He knew that his strength had left him, and he acknowledged his own impotence. Everything he had fought for had crumbled to dust, and the endless battles he had waged had left nothing behind. Exhausted warrior admitted that he had done all he could. He realized with bitterness that even in the last moments of his life he remained only a tool in the hands of others. The defeated warrior admitted defeat, but noted that the fight was worthy. He warned that there were 6 more like him left, and asked if the enemy had the strength to do the same thing again. The defeated enemy admitted that he could be proud of his victory. Before disappearing, he called on him to fight with dignity against the rest of the enemies and called him the Sorcerer King. The magic wand slowly descended from the sky, surrounded by light. Meanwhile, a massive creature rose from the ground, its footsteps shaking the surface. The huge warrior with the fearsome armor raised the weapon, which was glowing with dark energy. He admitted that he should have checked it earlier, noticing that even though the shape of the staff had changed, he could still feel the same power within it. Warrior said that the wait had been long, and added that they had been waiting for him for a very long time. At that moment, a mysterious object slowly descended from the sky. The black, massive figure thought about how his comrade was always worried about the boy who took risks again and again, like walking on a tightrope. He knew that even if the people around them hated them, there was no point in complaining. The huge figure recognized the fallen fighter, realizing that it was him. Another warrior, sitting nearby on the cooling body, noted that the technique of the fire dancer still needed some work. The demon admitted that, compared to the other, he had had a much harder time. He noted with regret that he had lost most of his memories. The dark figure said he was ready to help, but warned them against participating in battles. One of the interlocutors promised that they would remember this warning. One of the characters expressed concern that if the power and memory of the one who is now weak were to be restored, they might all die. However, another insisted that both must be restored, despite the risk. One of the heroes admitted that the path he was taking was difficult and full of trials. However, despite this, he firmly stated that he would not change his decision and would not regret the choice he had made, even if he had to fall very low. The huge chained warrior warned his companions that a deadly battle awaited them ahead. He said that if the main character regained his strength, he would be able to achieve what he wanted. But if something went wrong, he needed to immediately take him and run. At the end, he wished them good luck. The armored giant noticed the damaged mask lying on the ground and froze. He recognized it as part of the hero, and worriedly assumed that he too might have been trapped and corrupted. Looking at the broken piece of the mask, the armored figure said that this man was once called a hero. He turned and, noticing the tiredness in the eyes of the others, suggested that they rest for a while. One of them said that it was necessary to revive it, because the situation turned out to be more serious than expected. Things have gone too far, the process has accelerated so much that it is now impossible to hide what is happening. One of the observers added that the powerful forces of this world will definitely notice the changes. The young man in the cloak looked into the distance and said that soon everyone would see clearly. The hooded man standing nearby quietly added that even the blind prisoners would begin to understand. The man in the cloak approached the tree into which the sword was stuck and stopped. He recognized the place as the grave of one of the fallen, whom he called a rebel hero. The traveler stood by the grave and thought about the man who had once challenged the established order. He reminded himself that he was the only hero who had not submitted to the will of God and tried to find a way to coexist with demons. The boy wondered if their thoughts were similar. He looked at the remains of the burnt banner and felt that the trace he had found could be the key to solving his own mystery. The boy clutched the burnt flag tightly, not taking his eyes off the symbols. Even if his guess turned out to be just stupidity, he was ready to follow it to the end. The young man stood alone in the middle of the field, remembering all those who had once supported his choice. He was convinced that even if he had made a mistake, he did not need to see God. It was enough that he believed in his own path. A traveler entered a village and witnessed a quarrel. A local boy pushed someone, causing anger in a passerby. One of the men rushed towards the offender, clenching his fists, while the traveler in the hood watched what was happening with surprise. As the enraged man raised his hand to strike, the mysterious traveler instantly intercepted his hand. Looking straight into the eyes of the attacker, he restrainedly but threateningly warned him to stop, demonstrating his readiness for decisive action. The man tried to explain the situation, pointing at the child. But one of the locals said with disgust that they were looking at a demon, a dark elf. The child sat silently on the ground, while the traveler stood next to him, not taking his eyes off the accuser. The enraged man grabbed the child and, accusing him, demanded an immediate apology. He could hardly hold back his tears. The boy, his head down, barely held back tears as he repeated his apologies. He was on his knees, saying that without help he would have been dead by now, and that he was sorry that a demon like him was still alive. The boy covered his face with his hands, convulsively pressing himself to the ground. He begged to be punished. not knowing how to atone for his guilt, and even offered to hit him, just to make him regret that he was alive. The man in the cloak watched this silently, not knowing what to say. The man urged them not to hold back, allowing them to act at their own discretion. The man standing nearby in a cloak interrupted what was happening, saying that he was going to ask a very strange question if no one objected. The man tried to assure them that everything was all right. Meanwhile, the boy wondered why, despite the fact that the child was a demon, the child looked almost human. He wondered if they would have done the same if it had been a normal person. Hearing the phrase, the man grabbed his head in panic and asked in horror if it was really about a person. He could not believe what was happening and said that it was terrible. He desperately insisted that he would never have thought of something like that. He tried to explain that those creatures were completely different and did not deserve such treatment. Despite the humiliation, he shouted that the more pain they suffered, the more people's sense of imaginary justice flared up. The traveler asked in surprise if this dark elf had really killed a man. One of the villagers said sharply that they had a demon in front of them, and it didn't matter if he had done anything, no reason was needed. Someone suggested killing him immediately, before he started talking. The man confidently declared that he would not tell her mother anything, and reminded her who provided her with food, as if demanding obedience. The guy with a tense expression on his face heard someone's laughter and a mocking phrase, which claimed that everything that was happening was wonderful. From that day on, the boy began to doubt. He thought not only about this man, the guy noted that from that moment on, the desire to kill awoke in him for the first time. He began to understand that no matter how many saints he met, when it came to demons, hatred always prevailed. He realized that even as a child who had never encountered demons, he was taught to hate them. These values were shared by everyone, regardless of country or race. Although he himself had been raised with compassion and love, he began to feel as if he was being manipulated. The very thought of demons made him angry. The boy turned sharply at the sudden flash of energy. In the distance, a dark silhouette rose above the rocks. Someone in armor appeared from the darkness, surrounded by ominous spells. From the clouds of smoke, a stranger in heavy armor appeared before the heroes. His figure radiated menace, and on his shoulder rested a huge sword, leaving traces of destruction. Seeing the armored stranger appear, the hooded traveler recoiled and asked who he was. The armored warrior did not answer, and from under his helmet, incomprehensible words poured out like distorted spells, filling the air with ominous tension. As the traveler tried to address the mysterious knight, he began to shake violently, as if struggling with an inner rage. An inarticulate scream was then heard, and a destructive wave of energy erupted from his body, causing everyone around him to recoil in shock. The boy was confused, trying to understand what was happening, while the body of the armored warrior was distorted by pain and began to tear apart from the inside. His scream echoed around the area, and the energy continued to burst out uncontrollably. The armored warrior found himself on his knees, his body radiating dark, smoking energy. Clouds of darkness erupted from beneath his cloak, and the blade trembled in his hand, as if it were alive. Everything around him seemed to freeze, as an unknown force took complete possession of his body. The warrior with the spear called upon the magical power and cast a spell, asking the weapon to grant him power. His opponent watched in surprise, sensing a growing threat. Soon the spell worked, and a bolt of lightning energy fell upon the enemy. A powerful strike from an electric sword fell upon the enemy, accompanied by a flash of light and the inscription, "Purple Death." The hooded boy was surprised to realize that the attacker's strength was remarkably similar to his own. The huge knight took a direct hit to the chest and began to crumble under the force of the furious energy. A blinding flash erupted around him, and the figure emitting the power disappeared in a cloud of light. The boy watched in amazement as a powerful explosion of energy rose from the monster. He involuntarily acknowledged the strength of his opponent, calling him a rather strong monster, and tried to understand who he was facing. The warrior, surrounded by flashes of lightning, soared into the sky with incredible force. The hero, watching this, realized with horror that something destructive was about to happen, and screamed in an attempt to react. The heavily armored warrior charged at his opponent with a furious force, using a series of powerful attacks. His sword, sparkling with purple energy, released a blinding explosion that illuminated the battlefield and scattered debris in all directions. The boy was struck by the similarity of the warrior's movements in armor to his own. He noticed that the stranger's attacks not only resembled his style, but were also superior in strength. Realizing that his opponent had him cornered, he clenched his fist, determined not to waste another second on doubt. The boy realized that he couldn't cope with the usual means and decided to use magic. He concentrated, raising his sword, surrounded by energy, and firmly decided to bring the fight to the end. The youth, observing the scale of the attack, admitted that he had not seen anything like it since the battle against the Demon King. At the same time, his opponent summoned giants and demanded that they crush the enemy with a fury worthy of the gods. The guy with the sword took a fighting stance, preparing to strike. His opponent recognized him as White Lightning and the Thunder King. He was reminded that he came here because of the strange sensations. One of the interlocutors concluded that he had already defeated the Demon King, since he had such power. The knight tried to dissuade the boy, saying that it was not too late to turn back. He added that there was no point in thinking about this world, although he understood that no one would listen to him anyway. The knight, kneeling, asked the young man counter questions about how many times he could die and be resurrected, and whether he had seen what happened to those he protected. He hinted that the suffering of those around him was inevitable, and added that the young man was asking the wrong questions. He declared that wealth, honor, and ability were only illusions. He called heroes ordinary shepherds guarding their cattle, and added that if a person is satisfied with this world, he should turn around and close his eyes to what is happening. The Dark Knight warned that if the interlocutor decided to go over to their side, he would ultimately lose everything. The Dark Knight, without waiting for an answer, struck the fatal blow, uttering a final warning. His parting words sounded cold and final. The hero looked at the symbol lying at his feet in surprise. The chain it was attached to had broken, as if marking the end of something important. It was a sign of a courageous decision, after which there might be no turning back. He watched this, realizing that even the bravest warriors could fall. Just because of one mistake. The boy froze with his face twisted in shock, unable to believe what was happening. His gaze trembled as the realization slowly set in that the world he was used to had collapsed. He was breathing heavily, as if holding back strange emotions that had come rushing in with renewed vigor. The young man was shocked by what had happened, and did not fully understand who he had just encountered. Not far away on the desert plain, the Dark Lord muttered of time and loss, as if unable to believe that everyone was long dead. He tried to hold something inside himself, suppressing the uncontrollable force with the last of his strength. A robed creature with a bird mask knelt in the devastated land, clutching a staff. It stared ahead, clenched its teeth, and resolutely repeated that this time it had to protect everyone. There was worry in its voice. It knew that if it failed, everyone was doomed. The creature with the horned helmet walked slowly across the desert plain, considering its situation. It knew the stakes were too high, and scolded itself for its past selfishness. When silhouettes with spears appeared before it, it wearily noted that it was again encountering humans. The slime creature finally came to his senses, and his companion immediately expressed displeasure. He chided him for his recklessness and reminded him that not all problems could be solved alone. He then admitted that he had been worried, and added that without Firehead's help, he might have died. The slime explained that she had been very worried, which is why her body even began to resemble cheese with holes. Her interlocutor was surprised to notice that the slime had shrunk. However, the slime itself pointed to the mirror and asked to look there, because the changes did not happen to it at all. He reacted with surprise to the slime's new appearance. He recalled how the slime looked before, and was amazed that it was now able to take such complex forms. The slime itself calmly replied that this was quite natural for its nature. The character smugly admires his new form, comparing it to the majestic appearance of a large wolf, and speculating that this may be the next stage of the Demon King's evolution. His companion abruptly interrupts these thoughts, threatening to kill him if he gets too cocky. The cloaked companion laments that he can't even joke, then remarks that it's better than being arrogant like the queen. Slime anxiously asks if she's okay, and answers himself that her body isn't. Slime admits that there is something wrong with the heart. Then he suggests that they just go to the queen. The other character agrees, and adds that he will tell them on the way where they are and what is happening. One of the characters exclaims that he can't stand it any longer and throws the door open noisily. Another announces that all the guys from the fort have come to say hello. He asks why they don't come here themselves. One of the warriors is surprised to learn from his comrade that the person standing before them is not just a stranger, but the queen's companion and guest. He is also informed that in some sense this guest is even more important than all the elders in their hierarchy. This causes bewilderment and confusion in the interlocutor. The characters are completely confused, surrounded by question marks. One of them asks in bewilderment whether this guest is really more important than the other senior. The others, not understanding what is happening, repeat the questions in confusion. The masked man was enthusiastically explaining the hierarchy using an imaginary pyramid. He pointed to the top, calling the senpai the most important, then designated the middle for friends, and at the bottom mentioned the errand boy, placing him at the lowest level. One of the characters confidently stated that they were on a higher level, even higher than the interlocutor's senpai. The other, hearing this, repeated the word greenhorn to himself in surprise, admitting that what he heard was true. The Dark Lord admitted that he had achieved nothing and demanded that the conversation be stopped. He said that he did not know the place at all, and the other calmly replied that he had heard about it from the slime. The skeletal figure introduced himself as Atasha and explained that his companion was named Mackiner. He noted that fighting while traveling had seemed impossible before, but now the world had become rotten. He ended by expressing sympathy, saying that the others had had a hard day. The skeletal character with the pipe recalled how, after the death of the Demon King, the world began to collapse. He sadly admitted that even a cruel ruler was better than a complete lack of order. The second interlocutor, turning away, noted that this story was too old, and added that he would have died sooner or later anyway. The robed character explained that this place used to be an abandoned human castle. Now it has been renovated and turned into a commune. The second interlocutor put his mug on the table and doubtfully noted that he did not share this opinion. The character described the variety of creatures that once inhabited the area. Winged demonic harpies, worms swarming the earth, and dead, writhing undead. He acknowledged the irony of the tautology in his words, but noted that this was exactly how it had been. He explained that all these creatures had been driven out of their homes, and before you knew it, a settlement had formed. He then noted that the place was safe and deserted. The slime, hearing this, asked in surprise if they were now part of this settlement. One of the characters noted that the queen had always treated him well and that he had maintained contact with the fort, so he did not expect her to disdain him. He was then asked to go and greet the chief. The Dark Lord agrees to greet the leader, but specifies that it is only a greeting. He then asks where he is. Mackiner enthusiastically offers to show him the way. The character enters a spacious room where they are already waiting for him. He thanks for his time and explains that he was delayed on the way. The figure with black wings sitting at the head calls the rest of the feathered creatures. Those surrounding it immediately become alert and look ahead carefully. The bird-like creatures repeated the same question in confusion until one of them cried out in despair. The creature named Yat Anoel, named the lord of the ruined castle, pondered the worsening situation, doubting whether he could cope with what was happening. The multi-headed creature sat quietly in the middle of the room and explained that it needed multiple heads only for reading. It wondered why intelligence should be the reason for becoming the main one, since it was only reading a book. One of the listeners noted that this only increased his anxiety. The winged creature admitted that it was not up to the task and was not fit to be the leader. It noticed that people were behaving strangely and moving in an incomprehensible direction, and that the castle was also becoming restless. The companion was surprised and asked what was wrong with the people. The bird-like ruler worriedly reported that people were gathering into a large army and combing the entire country. He noted that their numbers were growing and the situation was rapidly getting out of control. The long-tailed monster explained that the human army in the area was rapidly growing, especially around the frontline bases. He suggested that something unusual had happened. He asked if they were familiar with the name of the sixth saint, Vargos. The bird-like interlocutor suggested that this man was called the Fire Lion. He added that he was not only incredibly strong but also cruel. One of the interlocutors admitted that he had accidentally killed the one called the Fire Lion. He added that he had heard about his unusual abilities, comparable to heroic ones. The others asked in surprise if this was really true. The feathered one said that in difficult times a strong leader is needed, and asked if the other wanted to become the head of the castle. Another one hinted that a wise strategist was needed, capable of giving advice on defense. Finally, one of them suggested that they inspect the castle for now. One of the heroes inspected the castle fortifications and came to the conclusion that the structures, although not bad, were too old. He thought that it would be possible to gradually replace the structures with stone, but this would take a long time. He suggested thickening the wood as a temporary measure and reminded that Yatanol should be aware. In conclusion, he noted that it was also worth thinking about weapons. He said that the elder elf brother reported the seal was broken, and that it happened by itself. He also mentioned that he was not sure if the object was a cane. The hero expressed hope that the master was okay, and conveyed what he had said. Under the current circumstances, he had a lot of preparation to do. He added that he had heard that the master had already returned to the village, and wondered if he was really all right. Someone told him that it was time to go to the queen. The hero noticed the man standing in front of him and stopped, clearly surprised. He bowed modestly and expressed gratitude on behalf of the fort's fighters for their help. The man sighed, covering his face with his hand, and quietly complained about the situation they were in. The man bitterly reported that the fortress had fallen and the queen's sister had died. He could hardly contain his emotions as he admitted that he had been unable to save one little girl. He admitted that he had killed many enemies. The man bitterly noted that this was the only thing he knew how to do. The character hangs his head, lost in dark thoughts. He regrets his powerlessness and blames himself for not being able to save an innocent life, feeling guilty and useless. One of them once saved the queen, giving her a new life, and now he cannot turn a blind eye to it. The man confessed that he lived for death and would do his duty if necessary. He apologized for not being able to say the right words and made a request because she was very weak now. He stopped in front of the door and quietly announced that he was going to come in. He declared his intention to give the girl a reason to live and slowly approached her, gently touching her hand. He bowed down next to her and humbly asked if the others objected. The girl got out of bed with difficulty, still feeling weak, but internally trying to overcome despair. She knew that now was not the time for tears and self-pity, because she was the queen, responsible for the safety of the fort and the morale of everyone who lived there. She considered the incident that had shaken them all to be her fault, convinced that she had made mistakes in management and had not looked after her subordinates. Deciding that she had no right to be weak any longer, she took the full brunt of what had happened upon herself and vowed to act, putting in even more effort than before. The girl, holding back tears, admitted that she didn't know where to start. She turned to her sister as if seeking support, although she herself felt lost and confused. At this time, the standing hero watched her with concern. He noticed how exhausted she was, both physically and mentally. Her condition was the result not only of sleepless nights, but also of internal experiences. Some wounds seemed to be self-inflicted, tormented by guilt. He understood that she needed not only rest, but also to regain faith in herself, and decided to pass on something important that, in his opinion, should rightfully belong to her. The girl, looking at the crown, the symbol of power extended to her, smiled weakly and laughed nervously. She admitted that she did not know whether she was worthy of wearing it, because she felt too weak and insecure. She quietly walked over and sat next to the creature, pressing herself against him. She admitted that she didn't know what to say but promised to stay close. He silently accepted her presence, knowing that it was enough for now. The girl ran up to him and began to weakly pound her fists, not holding back her emotions. He clenched his fists but did not respond, allowing her to speak out. Gradually, her blows turned into an embrace. She pressed herself against him, and tears quietly rolled down her cheeks. He covered her with his cloak and remained silently nearby. The girl quietly lay down, curled up under his cover, and gradually calmed down. Pressing herself against him, she finally allowed herself to relax and fall asleep, feeling his warmth and support next to her. The girl quietly asked him to stay with her, and he agreed without hesitation. They lay side by side on the bed, wrapped in silence and warmth, finding comfort in each other's simple presence. At this time, in another kingdom, disturbing news was being discussed. Priestess Finkari exclaimed in bewilderment upon hearing of the defeat of the legendary Fire Lion. It was a shock for everyone, because he was considered one of the strongest warriors. However, the council confirms that despite his status, he lost, and this is no longer a rumor, but a confirmed fact. Enfia von Triton, the sage's right hand, said that they are trying to contain the flow of information to prevent panic. However, this cannot continue for long, as rumors have already begun to spread. She also mentions that even the Holy King is involved in this, indicating the seriousness of the situation. Vincaria claims that the Six Saints are not just strong warriors, but a symbol of the United Kingdom. She emphasizes that their every step affects the fate of states, because they are the support of the entire world. At the same time, others note that panic can spread to ordinary people. She is alarmed to see that even the United Kingdom is no longer a cohesive whole. The Demon Lord's death has left us in unstable times, and it is especially dangerous to lose unity now. Enfia states that they were given special permission to intervene by order of the Holy King. He activates some kind of power by raising his hand, while everyone present watches in surprise. The advisor shows the mysterious cubes, calling them the Seal of the Spirits, and the kingdom's most closely guarded secret. Jiria, shocked by what she saw, exclaims that such a weapon was only allowed to be used in the war against the Demon King. She realizes that using this weapon could upset the world balance of power between countries. The palace discusses the fall of the Six Saints as a threat to the entire state. One of the leaders orders immediate action and hands over the Seal of Spirits. The Virgin of the Sacred Waters and the Mistress of the Still Trees, Jiria, are given the order to destroy them, which causes one of them to be shocked and alarmed. Jiria is shocked by the order and asks why she was chosen for this mission. She is told that the actions of the Six Saints are a matter of national policy. As the only elf among the saints, she symbolizes the union of humans and elves, meaning her participation carries political weight and great significance. The elf agrees with the decision, but asks to at least assign knights to accompany them. She emphasizes that they will need people with advanced or higher combat skills. The answer to her request is short and restrained, making it clear to her that her wish will be taken into account. An elderly man with a long beard, introduced as Kazodi, nicknamed Earthquake, watched the proceedings thoughtfully. Although he cared little for the intrigues of others, he recognized that the fall of two of the Six Saints was an event of no small importance. He felt that the situation was acquiring a new interest, awakening in him the expectation of something more. The old man recalled with interest how one of the fighters, despite his fear, dared to point a sword at him. He noted that he was able to defeat the fireboy, which made him an unusual opponent. He had not met anyone like him for a long time. At the same time, it was suggested that he might be the winner in the upcoming battle. Someone called out loudly to the old man, calling him grandfather. The boy ran around the roof, looking for the old man and calling him loudly, but to no avail. Soon he noticed him in another place, and the old man, hanging in the air, shouted cheerfully that he liked all this very much. Then he reproached the young man for not knowing his heritage. The great winged beast cried out in anger, demanding to know where a certain scoundrel was. One of the attendants, noticing the nails, pointed out that the Bone Lord they were looking for was actually busy repairing the wall. The winged warrior was loudly expressing his indignation, but was interrupted by a calm remark. Another participant called for restraint, reminding that the leader's excitement could be transmitted to the others and affect the overall situation, especially at such an inopportune moment. One of the people present shares rumors of an approaching army of people, among whom are supposedly two of the Six Saints. Another suggests that they have come for revenge for the Fire Lion. Meanwhile, another character, sitting on the sidelines, admits that he does not know what to do, and therefore decides not to interfere. One of the bird-like creatures accuses another of sowing discord and demands immediate action. In response, the other refuses to intervene, stating that it is none of his business. One of the observers is surprised by what is happening, and remembers that before him is a servant of the queen named Taraka the Bell Ringer. One of the characters confirms the rumor about the victory over the Fire Lion, but says that he cannot reveal the details. At this time, another interlocutor reasons that if the enemy had been released then, he would have destroyed everything around and spared no one. The man, shielding his eyes with glasses and adjusting his hat, bitterly recalls how his city was destroyed to the ground. He claims that he can no longer look into the faces of those whose blood he had to wipe away with his red and black scarf. He explains that while their demon neighbors were being killed, nothing happened in their territory. The man in the black robe says that the enemy first built an outpost near their city, and then attacked. The man in glasses threatens that if they still have complaints, they can just leave. The bird-like interlocutor immediately justifies himself, saying that he said nothing of the sort, clearly afraid of the consequences. The panicked, bird-like creature desperately admits that it has absolutely no idea what to do next. It screams that it doesn't know what to do and repeats that it truly has no idea how to handle the situation. Slime notices that there is an argument among the assembled and admits that it will not help matters. Instead of figuring out who is right, it suggests focusing on strengthening the fort and encourages everyone to do their best for the common goal. Those gathered decide to unite for a common goal and make every effort. One of the characters, looking at the fortifications and surroundings, thought about how he could be useful in this situation. One of the bird representatives thought about the need to demonstrate strength. He thought that even if the leader did not go, then who would be able to do it? Hearing his name, the others began to turn in his direction. Several beings of different races gathered on the platform. One of the characters listed their names, Sandworm Vrina, Deadman Vita, and Armas Harvey, emphasizing that they were the leaders. The three chieftains came closer and asked anxiously what had happened. One of them addressed the assembled people with a polite address. The other immediately asked a direct question. The bird-like inhabitants approached the chief and reported with alarm that they had heard his cries. One of them asked directly if it was true that a war was beginning. When the conversation turned to a possible war, one of the demons asked a direct question about who was ready to fight. One of them noted that they were just a group of demons, not a full-fledged army, and even the returning soldiers from the previous war would not be able to influence the outcome. There were alarming words about the enemy having a huge army, and now all that was left was to think about what to tell the children. One of the demon warriors indignantly accused his interlocutor of first proposing to gather the old men, women, and children, and then force them to fight in a doomed battle. His words expressed deep mistrust and despair about the upcoming events. The woman with a fierce expression on her face said, "The order will die. It's disgusting." The demon standing nearby regretted that they did not have a demon king to lead them into battle. He assured that they would not force anyone and added that the decision was up to each individual. He clarified that their training would be aimed at defense, not attack. The bird-like chief said that it was the chiefs who would be responsible for the evacuation. The Dark Lord admitted that he had expected to see men capable of fighting. The bird-like commander, looking down at those gathered below, noted doubtfully that this was not what he had expected. He noticed the young girls and, with distrust, clarified that they were still children. However, one of them firmly stated that they had already made a common decision. They would fight. The girl argued passionately that each of them could be useful. She listed the virtues of her friends and begged to be allowed to fight. Someone from the stands shouted for them to stop. A voice came from the darkness, interrupting what was happening. It suggested that they stop and stated that it had another suggestion. One of the people present perked up when he heard a familiar voice coming from the dais. Then he recognized the approaching man as someone he had not expected to see. The warrior who arrived confidently declared that children should not participate in the battle. He emphasized that gathering the army was the job of adults, and took the initiative. The man in military uniform appeared and introduced himself energetically as the Master of Innovations. He announced his arrival and greeted everyone by saying his name, Gimlet. His unexpected appearance caused surprise among the onlookers. The boy with short hair loudly declared that he had not arrived alone. Behind him, massive figures began to move, clearing a path and ordering the girls to disperse and return home. One of the arrivals emphasized that there were different ways to fight a war, hinting at a new strategy or approach. A young man came to the center of the square and proudly introduced the allies who had arrived. He said that those who were capable of fighting had gathered from all corners of the country. A clan from the caves in the north, warriors from the southern river, troops from the valley, and others. According to him, this was the best reinforcements he had ever seen. One of the demons noted that this was not just a village skirmish, but a real war. Another said that their opponent was 10,000 soldiers, led by 2 of the 6 saints. One of the elders, with surprise and doubt, said why he had decided to act. The guy with the pointy ears said that the enemy would still get to them, even if they waited. He emphasized that they had already been defeated earlier. The youth said that if this place fell, they would be next, and so he was not going to stand by and watch. One of the goons added that they too had heard about the pogrom at the human base, and that one of the 6 saints had been killed. Someone in the crowd shouted that they would follow their example and go after them. One of the elders noted that rumors spread so quickly that before you could look around, a crowd would appear in front of you asking if they could do it too. One of the giants suggested dying a little earlier, if it was inevitable anyway. He added that if he went through what was coming, he might be able to become the Demon King. Someone in the crowd remarked that a man should be responsible for his words. The warrior in the helmet muttered quietly that everyone around him was an idiot. The warrior said with a grin that if everyone was so eager to die, then he would show them real hell. One of the fighters predicted that the enemy's arrows would fall like rain, and their swords would flare like flames and tear flesh. He warned that throats would dry up, bones would crumble, and the last fangs would break. He said that darkness, blacker than night, would fall upon all, but despite this, they would not fall or be defeated. He said that their bonds would be stronger than steel. He urged the others to look forward, even if the dawnless sky turned darker than the dawn itself. The young man noticed that the speech sounded inspiring. Coming closer, he admitted that the interlocutor had changed a lot, although he himself could not say for sure, externally or internally. He added that he would like to ask a question concerning this warrior personally. The guy pointed to the object, specifying that it was exactly this one. He said that he had taken it out of the flames that had been brought by someone else. He added that he had tried to do something with it, but to no avail. The guy said that the object began to exhibit the same magic as the queen, and then changed its shape. He admitted that he did not understand anything, but noted that the thing was clearly sealed, and that it would require enormous force to destroy it. According to him, in addition to magic, a strong soul was needed to activate it. He concluded that the item was sealed with something serious so that no one could use it. The guy theorized that the sealed power could be divine and come from the Millennium Underworld. He emphasized that it is especially important that the one who put the seal may have this power himself, and it is possible that it was the interlocutor. In conclusion, he suggested putting aside thoughts for now and concentrating on the upcoming battle. One participant said he already knew about the evacuation. Another noted that the queen was still sad, and now the cockroach would probably have to take all the blame. Meanwhile, a third participant admitted that he felt bad every time they came. One character admitted that his heart was pounding. Another claimed that he had done everything he could, and a third reminded them that they had to do everything they could. He admitted that he knew what was happening was inevitable. He added that the queen's demons were trustworthy. Another noted that he could not have prepared for such a large-scale battle on his own, and that it was much easier to fight when everyone worked together. The hero assumed that he understood why the other was chosen to lead this place, to which he replied that he knew it himself. Then a strange noise attracted everyone's attention. The reaction made it clear that something alarming was approaching. One of the observers quietly said that the enemy had already arrived. The forest shook with the footsteps of the approaching army. The soldiers slowly emerged from behind the trees, lined up in a tight formation with their spears at the ready. The ground creaked under their feet, reflecting the determination of the attack. Giants emerged from the dense forest, towering over the line of soldiers with spears and shields. One observer noted with amazement that two commanders were sitting directly on the shoulders of these giants, not understanding how so many of them could have gathered. Two girls surrounded by a magical aura appeared in the air in front of the army. One of them was called the Mistress of the Unfaded Trees, and the other the Maiden of the Sacred Waters. A woman with blonde hair addressed the assembled warriors, declaring that the time had come to end the suffering. She reported that the demons had taken over the old castle and were using it as a fortress, but stressed that ordinary people might be afraid, whereas they were not going to retreat. The commander, addressing the assembled soldiers, reminded them that they were warriors who had risen against the enemy for the sake of the fallen hero Varos. He called upon them to take revenge and encouraged them to go forward in the name of God, assuring them that the death of the enemy would be on their hands. The warrior, in a rage, gave the order to open fire. At her command, the soldiers with drawn crossbows began to shoot, and one of the projectiles flew forward. The shell flew rapidly towards the enemy and crashed into the fortification, causing a series of powerful explosions. Debris flew to the sides, destroying the upper parts of the wall and raising clouds of smoke. The feathered one noted with surprise how the enemy's arrows burned one after another in the air. The second one explained that the Dark Elves had erected a powerful barrier that was impossible to break through. He explained that the Great Barrier consists of many fire barriers placed in different places. He added that even breaking through one of these defenses is already a feat, and for an ordinary soldier it is simply impossible to overcome them all. The barrier can be used not only for defense, but also as an offensive weapon. He added that the ballista shells are fired, coated with an incendiary mixture and then fired. The character explained that the arrow ignites when it passes through the barrier but does not burn. He added that such a projectile causes enormous damage to the enemy and leads to large losses. Fire arrows began to strike the army, causing violent explosions and panic among the soldiers. The troops tried to avoid the blows, but the flames quickly engulfed the battlefield and the nearby forest. One of the knights noticed that the flames were rapidly spreading across the ground. The soldiers realized that the ground had been saturated with fuel in advance, and before they could react, a powerful explosion followed. The ground beneath the soldiers' feet suddenly began to crack, and the earth sank downwards, forming huge fissures. One of the soldiers found himself in the center of the failure and began to fall into the bottomless darkness, while the others panicked and tried to understand what was happening. Enormous worms burst out of the ground, striking at the enemy and completely disrupting their formation. One of the warriors realized in a panic that the enemy was using a vein hidden underground, and another recognized that this was not just strength. Their commander really knows how to fight. The commander ordered the worms to stop attacking and activate the mechanism called the dancing lion. After confirming readiness, the fighters began to activate the device, turning the massive mechanism. After the preparation of the huge ballista was completed, the crew reported that it was ready. At the command of the commander, they fired, launching the massive projectile with great force. The soldiers notice a projectile flying towards them that looks like a barrel. One of the soldiers asks in fear what this object is, while flames are already flaring up over the battlefield, increasing the tension of the moment. A sudden explosion hits the ranks of soldiers as the barrel that was fired earlier explodes, shattering into a multitude of deadly fragments. One of the soldiers screams in panic about being hit in the eye, while others realize that the barrel contained nails and scrap metal, making the explosion especially devastating. Soldiers try to recover from the explosion, examining their wounds. One of the warriors clutches his eye in panic, while others scream in pain, hurt by flying shrapnel. The commander notes how effective and brutal the attack was, as the enemy inflicted damage without direct contact and without losses on their side. The woman with a serious expression tells everyone to stand down, stating that she will handle the situation herself. She suggests that Vargas's killer may be among the enemies, but even if that is not the case, this is a chance to test her own strength. She gives a command to the creature called Kials, and it rushes forward, unleashing a devastating attack. A huge explosion rocks the surrounding area, accompanied by flashes and a wave of energy. After a powerful explosion, the battlefield is covered in thick smoke. One of the participants notices with surprise that the enemy was apparently defeated with one blow. However, the next second the situation begins to change, hinting that the enemy has not yet fallen completely. A huge, multi-tentacled monster suddenly appears from the smoke. One of the characters retreats in panic, realizing that the enemy is still alive and poses a serious threat. The sorceress hovers above the water, surrounded by magical currents and a spell. She warns the enemy that she is going to use all her power and asks him to try to survive. One of the castle's defenders looks at the enemy with concentration and then suddenly attacks, throwing the sorceress away from the castle with a powerful blow. The Dark Lord gives orders to his allies as he flies into the air. He declares that he will now personally fight the sorceress, clearly intending to take the fight upon himself. One of the allies fell, screaming in pain, but the bird-like commander immediately intervened, deciding to deal with the situation himself. Meanwhile, another figure orders the Dark Elves to prepare a protective barrier, and the Orcs to prepare for another attack. The Dark Lord threw a projectile towards the sorceress, and the explosion caught her off guard. The girl tried to repel the attack, but she was thrown aside, along with a wave of energy and debris. The girl used the immense power of water, flooding the battlefield. The warriors watched in confusion as streams of water appeared from nowhere, not understanding how she was able to create such a volume. The sorceress floated above the battlefield, using the power of the sealed water spirit. She declared that she could now surpass her limits and was not inferior even to the hero, while powerful streams of water quickly engulfed everything around. A huge wave moved forward rapidly, covering the forest and everything around. The warrior watched what was happening in bewilderment, not understanding where the sorceress had summoned such a creature from and how she was able to cause a tsunami. The Dark Lord was amazed to see another giant creature emerging from the raging waters. She noted that the strike was a little inaccurate and decided to check whether the target was actually destroyed. The sorceress managed to repel the sudden attack, but the enemy showed resilience. She acknowledged his strength, but immediately expressed doubt in his tactics, believing that he was trying to win only by retreating. She confessed that she had always dreamed of having her own castle. She hinted that after the battle was over, they should destroy the current castle to take possession of it. The enemy responded coldly, saying that there was no point in talking, and challenged her to a duel of strength. The orcs watched in panic as warriors began to fall from the sky one by one. One of them cried out in horror, while the others prepared for battle, comparing their enemies to a horde of ants. Despite their numbers, they rushed to the attack, accepting the challenge. One of the fighters burst into the enemy lines, crushing the orcs with incredible force. His blows caused terror and confusion among the opponents. One of the orcs in a panic admitted that he had already entered into a frenzy, watching the mass slaughter. The orcs were surprised to see a giant beanstalk growing rapidly from the ground. They watched in confusion as it rose higher and higher, not understanding what their opponents were trying to achieve. The giant beanstalk continued to grow rapidly, clearing the space around it. It pushed debris and earth with force, forcing its way upwards, further surprising the enemies who watched. The huge stalk, having broken through the roof of the fortification, continued to grow rapidly, causing panic among the opponents. Some of them began to retreat in panic, wondering if this was part of a cunning plan. Estebel broke through the fortification with force, destroying the wall, which caused confusion and fear among the defenders. One of them said with surprise that the barrier was destroyed. The girl watched the wall being destroyed, noting the strength of her attack. She spoke with interest to her partner, reminding him of their previous attempts and offering to join the hero. The creature below stood against the backdrop of the destruction, ready to continue the fight. The Dark Lord charged, threatening to turn the enemy's head into a trophy. In response, the enemy fighter dodged and cast a powerful spell, causing giant spikes to erupt from the ground, aimed straight at the enemy. The sorceress calmly watched the attack, commenting on the pompous name of the spell. She pointed out with disdain that the enemy was wasting his time and warned that in the next moment she would give him a quick death. She shot forward with lightning speed, unleashing a devastating blow on her opponent. The blast of energy flew in all directions, knocking down nearby fighters. The Dark Lord admitted that the opponent was stronger than he expected, but noted that they had been delayed too long. He listed those who were in the castle: a sorceress equal in strength, former fighters of Vargos's squad, and elite knights. Having emphasized that after the activation of the destructive tower, the enemy's advance was inevitable, he thought about his next steps. 3 heavily armored warriors approached the scene, announcing their arrival. One of them mentioned that, speaking of them, they might have arrived a little late. They were introduced as the 3 Knights of Flame. The 3 Flame Knights stood together, discussing the situation. One of them reminded them that their master had originally commanded the war, and they could not stand aside now. Another expressed his determination to take responsibility, so as not to lose his honor in front of Vargos. The third worried that if they did not hurry, all the credit would go to the other 2 of the 6 saints. 3 knights were discussing the possible location of the enemy. One of them suggested that the enemy might be hiding inside the castle. Another remarked that such an opportunity would come once in a lifetime, hinting at the chance to gain glory in battle. One of the knights gave the order to find the enemy and cut off his head. He added that it was their duty to show everyone that the Knights of the Fire Lion were here. The knights entered the hall and immediately noticed a strange figure sitting on the floor. The stranger in the hat warned them that there was a war with demons going on here, and they had better leave if they wanted glory. One of the knights mistook him for a monster, but the other urged them to take a closer look. The stranger continued to sit quietly on the bridge in front of the massive gate, pointing out its obvious significance. He noted that the bridge was a typical defensive measure, but the fact that it was not a drawbridge was evidence of the primitiveness of the demons. At this time, the knights were preparing to attack, rapidly approaching. The man in the hat coldly agreed with the remark about the humans, noting their arrogance. He then deliberately destroyed part of the bridge, easily kicking the planks out from under his feet. thus demonstrating a hidden threat and undermining the confidence of the knights. The man in the black robe tore down the planks beneath the knights' feet and declared that it was impossible to cross the bridge. He warned that anyone who dared to step forward would become nothing more than rust on his sword, highlighting the difference between human pride and demonic calculation. The three knights charged, shouting threats, but the man in the black robe reacted instantly. The next moment, the space was illuminated by flashes of energy, and he struck back with lightning speed. The man in the hat held off a furious attack from three opponents at once and struck back. One of the knights tried to take the initiative, shouting that it was time to end the fight, but the enemy was already counterattacking. The man in the hat suddenly jumped up, grabbing one of the knights by the cloak. His sudden jerk caught his opponents off guard, and one of them, in amazement, did not understand what was happening. He rushed forward with determination, attacking the enemy with his staff. One of the knights tried to stop him, shouting that he would not let him pass. In response, he violently pushed him away, demanding that he give way. The man in the black hat slowly raised his weapon, giving a speech about how peace was unattainable. He declared that he would instead lead his enemies into the abyss, standing on the ground soaked in blood. His resolve remained unwavering despite the simple and broken weapons in his hands. The soldiers panicked and tried to hold back the advance, covering the entrance and raising their shields. One of the commanders gave the order to hold their positions, warning that the first wave of enemies would be followed by others. Huge warriors and many creatures burst out of the fortress, launching a rapid attack. The soldiers at the gate tensed, preparing to repel the oncoming attack. The creatures on the front lines realized that they could not cope with the enemy's numerical onslaught. One of the senior fighters said with a grin that now it was their time to pay for everything that had happened. Several giants stepped forward and ordered the others to retreat. One of them suggested using their bodies as a living shield to protect the others and hold back the enemy's advance. One of the giants, with a grim grin, noted that even their dead bodies would make a good wall. He urged everyone to make every effort, declaring that it was time for the big show. A barrage of arrows and debris rained down from the sky, causing chaos among the defenders. One of the giants was hit in the face, and another tried to cover himself with a makeshift shield. The blast wave blew the fighters apart, plunging the battlefield into chaos. One of the warriors, breaking through the debris, quickly attacked the enemy, delivering crushing blows. On the other hand, the giant rushed forward, but was met with a powerful counterattack. One of the defenders used a spear to disable the enemy, forcing them to retreat under the onslaught. The warriors cringed in pain, barely able to stay on their feet. The battlefield was littered with fallen bodies, and one of the knights, mortally wounded, collapsed to the ground. Below, another fighter fell into the dust, apparently unconscious from the powerful blow. Soldiers in armor were hastily reporting the loss of key positions. One of the bridges had collapsed. A tower had been destroyed, and the gates had been breached. Meanwhile, one of the wounded warriors, lying on the ground, admitted with despair in his voice that it was all over. The commander raised his sword and led his troops straight to the main battlefield. The soldiers rushed to the attack with shouts, but a sudden explosion in the forest caused them surprise and confusion. The soldiers looked in panic as the firestorm engulfed the camp. One of the commanders shouted, ordering them to immediately stop the attack and go back. Everyone was shocked. A forest fire had broken out, and the flames were now engulfing the camp. The Dark Lord approached the body, and, making sure that he was still breathing, uttered a few mocking words, enjoying his helpless state. Not wanting to give him time to recover, he launched a devastating attack, shrouded in flashes of energy. The demon tried to dodge, but the explosion engulfed him, and then more fighters rushed into the battle, finishing him off at close range. The Dark Lord, standing in the center of the raging fire, calmly reminded that it must be destroyed as soon as possible. He warned that otherwise everything around would turn to ashes. He continued to reason calmly in the middle of the burning forest. He noted that dry wood was excellent fuel and hinted that the enemy's water supply would soon dry up if they used it too actively. The Dark Lord continued his speech with cold calculation, pointing out that the entire forest had already become fuel for his flames. He asked his enemy a rhetorical question, reminding them of how many trees they had already drained in an attempt to stop the fire. He continued to apply psychological pressure, claiming that even the slightest spark could destroy the entire camp. He reminded them that an army without supplies was doomed, and the enemy was now responsible for it. The Dark Lord noted with a grim smile that he did not approve of attempts to extinguish the fire. His words sounded like a warning, hinting that any intervention would only make the situation worse. As the warriors charged, the mysterious enemy easily repelled their attacks. One of the commanders realized in a panic that even the elite could not defeat this enemy, despite his appearance as an ordinary goblin. One of the knights realized with despair that he could not strike, and the other recognized how dangerous their opponent was. Warrior realized that without a willingness to sacrifice one's life, victory would not be achieved. The commanders came to the conclusion that the battle with this monster would require sacrifices. One of the knights informed his comrade that he would act alone. He asked to return home and rebuild the squad, and he himself was going to sacrifice himself, declaring that even after death, his soul would go to the fiery lion. The heavily armored warrior charged with a loud cry, releasing a powerful explosion towards the enemy. In the next frame, another character watched the action tensely, tightly gripping the handle of his weapon. The armored warrior delivers a powerful blow that sends the enemy flying back, pierced by a flash of energy. In the next moment, the cloaked figure leaps out of the way, dodging the impact, and is thrown sharply to the side by the force of the blow. The figure in the hat finds himself cornered by a massive wooden door. The heavily armored opponent advances with a sword, confidently declaring victory, while the one who has been cornered clutches the hilt of his weapon, preparing for a final resistance. The heavily armored warrior uses an extreme combat technique that greatly increases his strength, but also puts a critical strain on his body. His movements become bestial. His energy increases even after a short use, and he makes a powerful attack despite the risk of death. The knight, overcome with rage, rushes into the attack with incredible speed. He abruptly closes the distance and delivers a powerful blow to the enemy, knocking him off his feet. The warrior in the hat fights at high speed, parrying attacks and dodging the enemy's blows. At this time, one of the knights rushes forward with a battle cry and begins a furious attack, delivering a series of powerful blows trying to break through the defense. One of the knights came down from above with a crushing blow, breaking wooden beams and everything in its path. The goblin, with his mouth wide open and a crazed look, was thrown down along with the rubble, not even having time to defend himself. One of the knights staggered out of the ruined gates, confirming that they had broken through the defense. His comrades greeted him joyfully, thinking that victory was already theirs. However, he himself could barely stand on his feet. His body was exhausted, and the pressure on his body was excessive. The armored warrior stood before the fallen body of his enemy, and the queen's voice came from above, breaking the silence. She wondered why the one she had ordered to leave was still here, and wondered if it was her fault. The queen stood before the fighters, not hiding her tears. In despair, she asked why they would not leave her alone, and why she had been given such a fate. One of the knights, irritated by her words, was already preparing to strike. During the furious attack, a warrior in heavy armor rushed at the enemy with a sword at the ready. The goblin managed to react to the rapid advance, parrying the blow at the last moment. The armored warrior approached the enemy, clutching a weapon in his hands. The creature in the black robe prepared to strike, but someone present was suddenly struck, causing surprise to the observer. The knight declared that he would take the enemy with him. Suddenly it became clear that he was not the real target of the attack. The enemy realized with amazement where the weapon was aimed, and the creature with the body of a snake, whom he called the Queen, was hit. The Dark Lord noticed that the enemy was still alive and mockingly stated that she had made a huge mistake. He also noted that they were facing one of the 6 saints, but even such strong spirits cannot make sound decisions if their power goes beyond their limits. Woman admitted that she now understood why the old man called her the toy of God. She realized that this tool controls her, and not she it. She sadly noted that she was still at a disadvantage. She also ironically admitted that this device, despite everything, was the only thing that could correct their mistake. The woman reflected on the current situation, concluding that most of the army had survived only because the warriors had fought the fire. She hoped that if the mages joined them, the fire could be put out. According to her, in that case, reinforcements could be expected. In other words, help. The Dark Lord calmly stated that if they could buy themselves enough time, they would eventually be able to achieve victory. The girl asked again if they really thought that, Then she added that it was true and suggested they write it down minute by minute. The Dark Lord admitted that when the enemy began to attack, he expected them to be as strong as a man he knew well. He added that he thought the battle would be difficult, but he could not even imagine that they would be defeated one by one. The girl realized that the one who had killed Vargos stood before her. She realized that now she would be the next target. It became clear to her that, having learned her plan, the enemy would no longer waste time, although earlier it seemed that he had deliberately drawn out the conversation in order to distract her. The Dark Lord revealed that he had originally planned to eliminate his opponent and use the confusion to strike at the other saint. He admitted that he could not waste any more time and was now forced to reveal his secret trump card, as circumstances forced him to act faster. He began to activate his final weapon, releasing energy that instantly attracted everyone's attention. The girl watched in confusion, not understanding if this was really the, quote, secret trump card. She felt the pressure and tried to understand if the enemy was preparing to attack. The Dark Lord continued to unleash his final power, creating a terrifying construct of black spikes. The girl in the ornate robe, realizing the scale of the threat, struggled to maintain confidence, reminding herself that she was one of the 6 holy guards. She watched tensely, unsure of what her opponent's next move would be. He completed his transformation, becoming a terrifying form with wings, spikes, and a massive body. His new form radiated power and destruction, causing even the air around him to distort the light. His silhouette filled the arena, as if the darkness itself had taken on flesh. Dark Lord looking ahead, he quietly said that the curtain had come down. His words sounded like a dark foreshadowing of the final act, while opposite stood the saint, ready for battle. He stated that out of respect for her, he will give it his all and go as far as possible. The girl understood that her chances of winning were vanishingly small. She was breathing heavily, feeling chills and sweating, and her whole body seemed to be screaming to run. Despair flashed through her thoughts about how she could win it all. She felt herself losing her last strength. She hoped that even if she died, it would be as one of the 6 saints. However, fear told her that the end would be meaningless. She could have been killed by a simple creature. The Dark Lord said that he was not going to play games with her. He said that because of her he had to leave the fortress for a long time, and now it was time to return. He wondered if everything was okay with the others. Vinkari tried to gather her strength. She told herself that it didn't matter who stood before her, because she was one of the 6 saints and she couldn't afford to die just like that. The girl activated the spirit seal, fully aware of its price. She knew that it gave incredible power and the ability to use forbidden techniques, but the seal absorbed life force in exchange. The Dark Lord easily destroyed the opponent's attack and coldly commented on her choice. He noted that turning her body into water was a mistake, because water can easily evaporate. He held the enemy in his arms and calmly told her that her fate would not change. He explained that he would simply heat her up if he could not cut her, and added that he was not going to back down. The girl realized that her death could affect others, even if she herself could not escape the end. Vinkari assumed that the enemy could not remain in their current form for long, otherwise they would have used it from the start. She stated that she was willing to die as long as it took to buy some time for her people. She was determined to continue the fight no matter what. She said that she was not so simple that she could be ignored, and added that she would not give up even if she could only hold her opponent for a second. The girl screamed furiously that it was not worth thinking that it was possible to defeat all 6 saints just like that. She emphasized that such a victory would not be without sacrifices. She declared that she was Vinkari, the Maiden of the Sacred Waters, the protector of the country, and the Sword of the King. She emphasized that she would never back down. Jiria explained that the divine-level spell is cast in exchange for the caster's life. She added that this rain can only be caused by Vinkari, Tears of the Saints. The soldiers began to complain that the reality was very different from the promises. One of them indignantly recalled that they were told about a simple cleanup after the death of the Demon King, and were assured that no one would die. The girl standing above wearily admitted that she was fed up with all this. One of the soldiers admitted in despair that everything they believed in was a lie. He said that they were dying like insects, and without the support of a girl named Vinkari, the food was burning, there was not enough water, and the situation was becoming critical. The warriors pleaded with Jiri to let them go home. He admitted that everyone had been shocked by the Tears of the Saint spell, and the defeat of one of the 6 saints was too much of a blow for everyone. One of the warriors warned that the soldiers could disobey orders and run away at any moment. He asked to demonstrate the power of the 6 saints to raise the army's morale. The girl decided to use magic, despite the possible consequences. She explained that if it failed, she would be of more use in the victim. The warriors, overcome with panic, began to feel their bodies losing control, not understanding what was happening. Jiri activated a forbidden technique that required a sacrifice. The soldiers watched in shock. The warriors asked why such a dangerous spell had to be used. The girls accused another character of stupidity, reproaching him for his frivolity. One of the knights was wrapped in magical vines and lifted into the air, and the tree giant anxiously cried out Jiri's name. She came to the conclusion that all the others were useless. Desiria was mentally thinking about how to justify herself to the king. She decided to play the victim and show that she had fought to the end, although in reality she was irritated by what was happening and regretted that she had gotten involved in this matter. The girl did not hide her irritation. She made sure that all those who were interfering with her had been eliminated, and now she could calmly take up the following actions. The queen watched as Taraka was wounded. Taraka struck the soldier. He, badly wounded and bleeding, tried to justify himself, barely able to utter words. The woman stood there dumbfounded, realizing that everything that was happening was the result of her mistakes. Taraka told the girl the hard news about her sister, referring to the story of the Bone Lord. The girl reacted with unexpected fear, abruptly rising from the bed. He continued to tell of her sister's suffering, mentioning her mutilated body and unbending will until the very end. The girl listened with anxiety, imagining how her sister would look at her if she saw her in her current state. He reminded the girl with a firm expression that her sister would live as long as her memory remained in her heart. He emphasized that now it was up to her to decide how to continue living. Taraka, his face twisted with rage, shouted that even if he had to crawl in the mud and eat roots, he had to continue living. He desperately urged the girl to live for her sister. He calmly said that they would meet her sister again. He added that everyone needed her help now, urging her not to back down. The man wearily admitted that everything that was happening resembled a series of failures. He said that, despite this, it would be especially frustrating to give up while lying in bed. Realizing that he might be asking too much, he nevertheless asked to fight to the very end. He admitted that he didn't know what words to choose to support her, but still asked her not to give up. The man, leaving, reminded that any storm ends sooner or later, and after them only clear skies remain. He said that he would go get an umbrella. Taraka felt himself losing strength with every step, and his legs felt as if they were burning. He looked anxiously at the sky, wondering at the strange rain that was giving off something unusual. He clenched his fist, feeling the curse poisoning his body. Despite the pain, he admitted to himself that he still wanted to take at least one of the 6 saints with him. Gripping his weapon and looking ahead with determination, the man moved forward along the wet street, preparing for the decisive battle. He was going to have a real fight, putting everything on the line. A man ready for battle suddenly notices a massive creature falling from the sky. He watches it land in confusion and quickly realizes it is not an ally. His face contorts in surprise and alarm as he tries to comprehend what is happening. A creature falling from the sky crashes into the ground with great force and collides with an armed opponent. A tree-like creature in armor steps forward, taking the initiative. It says that it will cover the fighter, and remembers how it decided to intervene after the attack stopped. At this time, another character, looking at its appearance in surprise, cannot believe that it is actually a slime in front of him. While it was raining, the little creature watched as wooden monsters appeared out of nowhere. It didn't understand what was happening and decided to hide to avoid getting hit. The creature used its ability to enter the wooden soldier. Activating the slime mode, it turned the warrior into a puppet and began to control his body. The creature finishes the story about how everything happened after the soldier turned into a puppet. His partner appeared. The rest of the events, according to him, are already known to the interlocutor. The girl explains that her main trump card is the Black Cloak, created from molten steel. However, he admits that this power has one drawback. It is not designed for a protracted fight. Dejiria watches the battle with concern, realizing that the enemies before her are no ordinary monsters. She is especially worried about the Black Fighter, whom she recognizes as the killer of the Fire Lion and the Water Maiden. She fears that if the rain stops too early, the consequences will be catastrophic. The girl looked anxiously at the figure of the fighter, who outwardly copied the fire lion. However, according to her observations, the strength of this new opponent clearly exceeded the original, which caused her growing concern. Jiria thoughtfully asked if she should summon the spirit. At that moment, a powerful blow thundered nearby, scattering debris. The armored warrior turned to the brute standing before him and asked if he was the Bone Lord. The warrior noticed that his companion was wounded, to which he replied with a smile that it was just a scratch, and thanked him for his concern. Meanwhile, they began to discuss how to break through the crowd of enemies. He notes that the enemies do not pose much of a threat. What is more important is to reach one of the 6 saints. However, he warns that if they move carelessly, they may be crushed by the Colossus. Taraka notes that the enemy must be eliminated before she can act in earnest. He suggests his own idea and asks if the others would like to try his plan. One of the fighters loudly declares that he feels like a gardener pulling weeds and asks if the others are finished. Meanwhile, the other two discuss a plan. One suggests having fun, the other approves of the idea and asks for permission to speak to the commander. The character in the hat notices that the opponents have started moving strangely and expresses caution. The warrior with the sword assumes that the opponents are up to something. At this time, the rotating device begins to activate, and someone says chaos magic. The magic starts to work, and the next second, a huge number of sharp branches pierce the battlefield. One of the warriors shouts the spell, Ash Greatsword, destroying everything in its path. The enemies find themselves in the epicenter of the devastating attack. The girl is shocked to see who is facing her, a regular goblin. She wonders why him, because she considers him the weakest. Meanwhile, the goblin calmly heads towards her, preparing to engage in battle. The wooden soldier shielded the goblin from attack, arousing suspicion in his opponent. She watched what was happening and began to guess that he was going to do something unexpected. At that moment, someone screamed, realizing that the goblin had been noticed after all, and exposed the weak point of the wooden golems. He hid in the blind spot between the massive golems. Their size and limited maneuverability made it difficult for them to track his movements, allowing him to remain undetected. He, controlling the wooden soldier, began to taunt the golems to get their attention. He deliberately led them through obstacles, using their poor maneuverability and blind spots to lure them into a trap. The girl watched this and realized that this was part of the plan. They began to attract the golem's attention, deliberately becoming bait. When they lost sight of him, they turned their attention to the wooden soldier. The horned girl watched in surprise, realizing how quickly the monsters had lost their target. Taking advantage of the enemy's confusion, the goblin rushed forward, breaking through to the enemy. Goblin gritting his teeth, he rushed forward with a weapon in his hands. At this time, a huge wooden golem tried to strike but missed, destroying part of the shelter. The girl watched what was happening, without interfering, while the goblin confidently approached the target. A warrior in massive armor with a raised blade rushed forward, preparing to strike. Jiria calmly watched his actions and confidently said that he was just a goblin and could not kill her. At this time, the goblin, using an improvised spear, threw it with force in her direction. A warrior in heavy armor with a skull-shaped helmet loomed over Jiri, holding his shield in a fighting stance. She looked up at him, as if preparing to defend or cast a spell. Jiria jumped back with a horrified expression, as the heavily armored warrior's huge sword came down with force in front of her. The blade sank into the ground centimeters away, creating a shockwave among the leaves and water. She mockingly commented on the failed attack, stating that she was surprised that she had managed to dodge it. She reminded him that wood magic was vulnerable to fire, and that it was not so easy to kill with one blow. The warrior watched silently as her figure disappeared behind the foliage again. The enemy was happy about the rain that had started, calling it her support. She explained that this water was tears of saints, for the creation of which someone had sacrificed their life. Holy water not only extinguished fire, but was also deadly poisonous to demons, and also accelerated the growth of trees, making them stronger. Jiri thought out loud about his former partner. She admitted that he hadn't really wanted to work with her because he thought she was too weak, but now she admitted that at least she was useful. The Dark Warrior held his weapon firmly and said that he did not care what others did. He stated that it would not affect what he himself was going to do. The armored warrior calmly declared that he would kill the enemy right there. In response to this, Jiraiya, with a mad smile, shouted that time was up and called him an idiot. After that, the armored warrior delivered a crushing blow. The armored warrior spots the enemy and prepares to attack. The enemy strikes him in the head with his fists. The armor cracks and the warrior flies back. The enemy continues the attack, punching the ground. Another asks his comrade if he is okay. He said that Teraki's death was in vain. The others discuss how they won't be able to surprise the enemy a second time. One of them adds that she won't take her eyes off them now. He notes that without Taraka, they can try to find the enemy's hideout. Jiri also thinks that if he had been a little faster, he would have killed her already. She then says that the wooden golems must be used as a sacrifice to free the spirit. The girl with the ribbon in her hair says that she will not wait and watch, and that they must get ahead of the enemies before they attack again. A huge wooden golem appears before the characters. The girl calls him the King of Trees and the Snake Dragon. Then she orders him to eat. A wooden golem takes another wooden golem and starts eating it. It eats its body, tearing out chunks. One of the watching characters is surprised to see the golem eating its own. Another character says that they don't even have a backup plan. Another character suggests that this might be a trick and warns that they need to be prepared for anything. The Dark Lord says they must give it their all. He activates the ability, causing a pattern to form on his body. He states that his skin will now obey the blade of his sword. The girl with the ribbon assumes that the enemies are planning to do something. She notices that it is strange. There are pieces and bodies of wooden golems on the ground. The girl says that she has sacrificed many of them. She believes that this is the end, but does not regret the loss of energy. Then she adds that she is sure that everything will be fine. The girl says that she is using her most powerful spell. One of the armored fighters watching does not believe what is happening and thinks that it is abnormal. He wonders how this is even possible. The next moment, a powerful explosion occurs, causing destruction and throwing the enemies back. A huge dragon appears in front of the fighters. The dragon rose into the air and turned, preparing to attack. One of the fighters rose into the sky with magic. The dragon sent long roots towards him. The warrior on the ground volunteered to fight and told him to come. The girl with the beret did not understand what was happening. The armored fighter explained that the real power does not belong to a person, but to the creature itself. He called its abilities regeneration and variability. She noted that its outer shell is stronger than steel and remains intact even after repeated destruction. It can even regrow lost limbs. The more it is destroyed, the stronger it becomes. And the more creatures it absorbs, the stronger its abilities become. He reported that the creature had absorbed 10,000 soldiers. He explained that it now possessed all the qualities that a normal dragon possessed in full. Now that both fighters are here, even the bravest heroes will not want to face this creature. He added that he was not going to let his guard down. The next moment, an unexpected attack began. The girl gave the order to crush the opponents. The dragon dealt a powerful blow. One of the fighters screamed in pain. Another one called him a fool in panic. One of the heroes was thrown back by the blow and fell to the ground. One of the fighters rushed forward, shouting for the enemy to let his comrade go. He promised to save him. The second fighter with the sword thought about how strong the weapon was and exclaimed that this was madness. He shouted for his partner to get off the enemy, otherwise he would kill him. The fighter mentally complained about the fragility of his body and decided that he needed to transform into a smaller form. However, another character admitted that he had been trying to reverse the transformation for some time, but could not do it. He assumed that there was some kind of limiter. He rushed to his fallen comrade and mentally screamed for him not to dare die. He was in despair and thought that they were simply making fun of him. One of the fighters thought that he would not be able to call anyone for help. He thought that the idea of using the puppet technique to capture the enemy, this is nonsense. He also realized that his comrade had already used resurrection once. He thought that his soul would not survive the second reincarnation and that it would lead to death. He begged his comrade not to die and not to leave him. He screamed for him to live. The second, losing consciousness, thought that he didn't care, but his friend still had to fight. At that moment, an explosion occurred. The girl watched what was happening and said that this was the end. Jiri said that they could now examine the corpse. However, when he looked, he noticed that the body had disappeared. The two fighters, exhausted, sat side by side on the battlefield in the rain. The fighter noticed that the enemy's body had disappeared and assumed that it could have been teleportation magic. He wondered who exactly could have used it. At that moment, his wounded comrade let out a groan, and he noted it out loud. He rushed to his friend and mentally accused him of using teleportation. He demanded to know why he didn't do it right away and said that he was very scared. The second fighter quietly replied that it wasn't him. One of the fighters explained that he could not use magic because of the thorns, and teleportation is generally considered higher magic. Appears on the field in the rain. The queen confessed that she wanted others to abandon her and make her feel guilty, thus disqualifying her from being queen. She remembered how even after her death, those who were with her continued to admire her, telling her that it was okay to run away. She realized that it was better to die herself than to let another demon die. Even though it was too late, she declared that she would fight. The queen apologized for her stupidity and said that it had taken her a long time to understand everything. The Dark Lord was also glad that she was okay and called her queen. The queen thanked him, although he remarked that now was not the time to worry about others. She noted that both were in bad condition. He said that he would fix everything now. The queen used a magic spell called Healing Butterflies of Moonlight, and glowing butterflies appeared around her, filling the space with radiance, and began to heal those present. Another compared the magical light to the grave of the fireflies. The queen replied that it was beautiful. One of the fighters thought it was a bit creepy and wondered why his hair had grown. The queen explained that this could happen when you really use magic. One of the heroes said that he felt better now and noted that the queen's magical power had become much stronger than it had been before. He asked if she could enhance magic. The queen replied that she had been out of her mind during the escape, but magic was an art of the mind. She added that she did not understand why she had to explain anything at all. The knight asked if the queen could enhance him with magic. He explained that if she could do so, he would have a chance to win the fight. The queen was surprised and asked why he needed magic, since it was a basic spell. She asked what he meant. Jiraiya cursed, asking where they were hiding, and couldn't find them even with a search spell. She wondered if the enemies were not in the forest, where they tried to find them through the plants. Then perhaps they were in a place devoid of vegetation, for example, on the scorched earth near the castle, or even inside the castle itself. She wondered if they had hidden a wizard in the castle for their escape. Perhaps he had teleported them to him. She thought with disgust at what disgusting pieces of shit they were, and wondered if there were any more people left in the castle. The girl said that she would go to the castle just in case. Soon she felt an unusually strong magical energy and was surprised, wondering what kind of power it was and what was happening. Seeing a figure on the wall, she noticed that it was a silhouette of a man. After that, she added with irritation that they were stubborn bastards. The queen worriedly asked if he was okay, and reminded him that he should be aware that he could be torn apart by so much magic. To this he only laughed and told her not to worry, it was no problem. He added that she should not bother her head with it and just start casting. She noted that it was high-level magic, and added that the amount could be large enough to blind. She then said that a normal demon would have already reached his limit. He said that she had managed to lift him from the brink of death to this state in a short period of time. He admitted that she was amazing, and added that at least it seemed that way. He noted how incredible she was. He then noted that his interlocutor, an excellent healer, or rather even the queen of healing, he said that it was nothing. Another character was indignant that so little time had passed since their meeting, and suggested that they stop flirting already. One of the characters asked if the other was considering the queen as a potential bride. To this, the Dark Lord replied that, unfortunately, he had no reproductive organs. The queen exclaimed in confusion that she did not understand what they were talking about, and called the others idiots, fools, and perverts. The hero asked if he was really expected to say whether she would become his wife after the war, adding that it would sound like a great death vow. At this point, another character noticed one of the 6 saints approaching them and suggested that they take action. After this, they both expressed their readiness to begin the battle, decisively moving towards the enemy. The Dark Lord said that he was counting on his allies and urged everyone to do their best. He then suddenly took off into the sky, heading for the attack. Jiri noted with surprise that he did not understand what was in front of him. He also wondered where the other hero had flown to, and thought that he might have decided to forget about her altogether. The girl thought that this was good, because the black one was the most dangerous among them. She reasoned that even if it was a trap, she had a long-range attack, and decided that she should kill those two first. The girl screamed, surprised by what was happening. She wondered if he was going to change the weather, and noticed that he had risen above the clouds. It became clear to her that he was going to get rid of the tears of the saints. She said that it was too late, because the Tree King's snake dragon had absorbed a lot of holy water. She shouted to attack. The girl noticed that the opponents had repaired the dragon and even made it stronger than before. She realized that the Dark Elf's fire barrier had been activated. She also came to the conclusion that using the tail as an attack was not a good idea, and thought that she could just attack head-on. At the same time, she expressed dissatisfaction with the fact that she had to destroy the elven barrier, and said that she felt disgusting. The queen said she was ready. One of the heroes expressed admiration, noting that her ability to control magic was impressive. He also noted that now it was just the two of them, and suggested that they destroy the 6 saints. Jirian noticed that pieces of metal were falling from the sky. The girl said in surprise that it was the black armor of that monster. She also wondered what was happening, and looking up, asked herself if it was really metal. They saw a terrifying creature in front of them. The character claimed that their bones were stronger than those of dragons, and then declared that victory would certainly be on their side. He said that now they had to deal with one of the 6 saints. Queen asked if he was okay, noticing that he looked even bigger than he had back at the base. He replied that although he had some limitations, he could still fight. He added that he felt even better than before. He then told everyone to hold on tight. Jiraiya couldn't believe what was happening and indignantly exclaimed, "Who the hell is he?" Internally, she was shocked, because dragons were considered the most powerful creatures in the world, who could easily subjugate the entire world. It wasn't just any dragon. The one standing before them was the Serpent Dragon King, the owner of the most powerful body among all creatures of his kind. The girl watched the scene with fury. She couldn't believe that anyone could defeat such a creature. She was tormented by disappointment in the hero of the past, because he never completed his mission. In despair, she wondered if this mysterious warrior was a descendant of the Demon King himself. The girl was furious. Realizing that there was no turning back, she decided to act. Considering it unacceptable to just sit and watch, she screamed that she would kill everyone and rushed into battle with determination. The Serpentine Dragon King launches a devastating attack, unleashing the power of his body on his enemies. One of the saints, clutching his sword, prepares for a desperate resistance, while the situation clearly becomes more and more tense. A powerful creature with a fearsome build delivers a powerful blow that causes destruction over a large area. Jiraiya reacts with surprise and alarm, clearly shocked by what is happening. Dragons or demons are engaged in a fierce battle. Their blows cause powerful destruction around. The fight looks extremely tense and destructive, demonstrating the enormous physical strength of both opponents. The hero points out that their opponent is one of the 6 saints, and also notes that his ally hates fighting in the vanguard. The overall mood is tense. The enemy's forces are clearly superior, and the fight promises to be difficult. He notes that the enemy's strength depends on her subordinate soldiers, wooden golems, colossus, and dragon. This allows us to conclude that victory is possible if we deprive her of these pawns. He comes to the conclusion that her magic is mostly supportive. She strengthens her allies and hinders her enemies. They also notice that she tries to get the most out of her subordinates. Jiraiya called them small fry, and she has no time for them. The queen notes that although her strength depends on the dragon, she is not weak on her own, especially in close combat. He wonders if she can cope now that she has lost her dragon. The girl, meanwhile, demonstrates a new power, Eye of Stardust, which none of them have heard of before. One of them declares that this is their game now, and they are going to take back what was lost. The moment of decisive attack is shown. They attack the dragon with maximum force, using all their capabilities. The girl is separated from her dragon, but she does not lose confidence. She gets angry and declares that she can cope without him. Despite the threat, she says that she has been on the brink of death many times before, and survived each time. Now, following the Lord God, she feels that she has become stronger. The dragon delivered a devastating blow with its tail, almost reaching its target. One of the heroes noted that the attack was close to success, but still did not reach its target completely. The hero activated chaos magic. He then used a powerful spell called Branches of the Ash Tree, from which a menacing force began to emanate, engulfing everything around. The spell Branches of the ash tree showed its power. Massive thorns and branches burst from the ground, striking everything around. The magic engulfed the battlefield, attacking enemies from above and below, demonstrating the destructive power of chaos. The character stated that the enemy's true strength was not in his size or strength, but in his ability to regenerate. He noted that he was used to fighting the same enemies over and over again, and expressed his intention to see how many times he could come back to life. The wind blew through the dense canopy of trees, making noise as she ran, breathing heavily and constantly looking over her shoulder. Finally, stopping and turning sharply, she muttered in obvious annoyance about how much they were annoying her. After irritably expressing her thoughts about the persistence of the young men pursuing her, she quickly swung her sword, but was immediately met with an unexpected and powerful counterattack from the brute. In the midst of a fierce battle, he was convinced of his initial guess. She was, as expected, not very good at close combat. However, he was seriously mistaken, because this young girl, accustomed to fighting at a distance, was not going to play by their rules, preferring her own tactics. Pulling out her long, sharply sharpened sword from her wide sleeve, she immediately attacked the enemy with her top-secret weapon, the legendary sword of Taraki. He mentally urged himself not to give in to their obvious provocations, explaining to himself that she was only trying to throw them off balance, and insistently reminding them of who exactly they were fighting. However, the undeniable fact that she was trying so hard to put some distance between them clearly told them that she had a deep fear of close combat. And that, in turn, meant that they would have a significant advantage if they managed to catch her. They were playfully in the mood and, with a grin, suggested that they play tag. The opponents mistakenly decided that they had finally cornered her because at the very end of the winding road the forest suddenly ended. They reasoned that if she began to move diagonally, and not just in a straight line, then they would be able to catch up with her much faster. And this, in turn, meant that she would not be able to simply run away again into the dense forest, using the vines for quick movement that grow exclusively there. He also added that since they were already deep in the forest, she only had 3 possible directions to go. Once the forest ended completely, she would have to rely solely on her own strength. In addition, she should already be significantly exhausted from the previous protracted battle, so their chances of being caught were extremely high. They suddenly noticed that the forest had become suspiciously dark, which seemed not to be the case before. However, they quickly realized that they were distracted from their main goal, because they had almost caught up with her and decided to fully concentrate in order to finally catch her. Suddenly, they realized that the dense forest abruptly ended. They shouted to themselves that it was time to finish off this girl from the Six Saints, when suddenly their gaze was caught by something incredible. Their astonished gaze was met with a huge, majestic circle, overwhelming in its grand scale and immense dimensions. She skillfully used her powerful lunar magic and created an impenetrable thunder barrier around herself. In complete confusion, they suddenly realized their fatal and irreparable mistake. It was not they who had trapped her, but on the contrary, she had masterfully driven them into a corner. He realized belatedly that the queen's remark about the sudden darkness in the forest was extremely weighty and prophetic. Perhaps it was because the trees growing around the winding path were significantly taller than the others, and this road deceived them not only visually but also mentally, and the small shoot that suddenly emerged from the ground quickly rushed upward, rapidly growing into a huge, gigantic tree. She noted that they had managed to survive thanks to the barrier she had created, but they were too much trouble and problem. As she pulled a skillfully crafted makeshift arrow from sturdy vines, she asked if they knew that if the magical barrier was significantly overloaded, it would simply collapse. Noting that they had at least made a decent attempt, she released the arrow without hesitation, and it shot straight towards them in a blinding beam of light, leaving no chance for evasion. The distant sound clearly hinted at a tense battle, where he too would very much like to help. But he, unfortunately, had his own, no less desperate struggle. He felt the dragon's unknown power rapidly growing and strengthening, and came to the logical conclusion that this could not be explained by simple magic. But suddenly an unexpected thought struck him. The dragon was gradually freeing itself from all the physical and magical limitations inherent in any living organism, and was raising its power to such a threatening degree that it was ready to completely destroy itself in the process. He also clearly saw that the monster was using its incredible regenerative ability to attack, and if only it broke faster, it would be much more convenient and profitable for them. The fight gradually gained momentum and became more and more furious and merciless. He mentally addressed the others, urging them to squeeze everything out of her, because they had very little precious time. Dodging and defending themselves from the crushing blows, they were amazed by this monstrous power and finally convinced that during the previous chase she was only skillfully playing with them, which is why she did not fire at them earlier, saving her strength. They also noticed that the queen's barrier was at its limit of strength, and they would have to take a huge risk. Turning to the queen, he honestly admitted that the current situation was clearly not in their favor, and that something much more than just their lives was at stake. He would like to ask her for one important favor, when suddenly her happy face appeared before his mind's eye, expressing complete readiness to always help her loyal friends no matter what. He thanked her sincerely and then asked if she could squeeze her thin body into a wooden puppet. She replied, confused, that she could try, and he quickly explained that his carefully thought-out plan was that they would first have to come under attack. He added that falling trees were certainly heavy and obstructive, but they also significantly reduced visibility, so she would not be able to aim accurately at them. A fallen tree itself was a poor target, and trees fell too quickly to be easily avoided, and piles of them could be used as a reliable shield. If they did everything as planned, they would have only one attempt. Then he said that, in his opinion, the opponent would fight with all her incredible strength, so they had to catch her by surprise, and the queen had to attack her first. She glared at them, calling them bastards and their decision a complete nonsense, as a frontal attack is doomed to inevitable failure, and it is definitely not possible to get there in one piece. She also seriously doubts that they will be able to move quickly if they are injured, and asked how they plan to climb the tree while injured, as this all seems like some kind of ridiculous joke. She continued that they would have to try very hard to kill her, as the density of the trees prevented a direct attack, and if the trees became much less dense, they would lose their only cover. Even if they managed to get behind the monster and try to hide, she would destroy them as soon as they showed up, starting with the wooden soldier, leaving them no chance. She, looking straight at the target, assumed that if they did appear, it would only be here, and released her arrow. But she was immediately very upset to see that she had only hit the helmet, and that, to her regret, was only bait. After realizing that attacking head-on was a very bad idea, he finally realized that if he jumped to the very top of the large, fast-growing trees, he could end up in the right place, taking her completely by surprise. From a perfect position, they delivered a devastating and incredibly accurate blow. She tried her best to keep them in sight, constantly telling herself how much they were boring her, and at the same time constantly glancing back at her few arrows. Meanwhile, he, sharply grasping the neck of his armor, happily announced that they had had an incredible stroke of luck, and that the queen's star turn had arrived. As soon as the queen deftly got out from under the heavy armor, she grinned maliciously, noting with obvious pleasure that she, too, had thought through absolutely everything a couple of moves ahead. She added that she was also used to thinking 2 steps ahead and, quickly attacking them, reported that her special weapon was enchanted to break through even the strongest steel and even the most powerful magical barrier. But the queen, sarcastically apologizing for her insight, replied that she, unlike her rival, thought 3 steps ahead. And just as she was about to indignantly say that she could not believe how she could lose to someone like her, the queen, pressing closer to her, replied that for an ordinary botanist, she knew too many secrets. She also added at the end that she looks like she has been living too long, which is quite suspicious. Her razor-sharp sword pierced the girl through and through, thus marking her undeniable and complete victory. The girl grabbed her, hanging on the blade, and indignantly, almost screaming, asked why the hell she had won and what the hell was wrong with her. She also curiously asked if she had ever killed anyone before, jokingly adding that she herself had once been that naive, but had changed a lot since then. Closing her tired eyelids, she finished her thought by saying that if she had known that everything would end exactly like this, she would have wanted to die much earlier so as not to have to see it. Looking at her unexpected defeat, she smiled bitterly and said that the funny thing was that she never thought that her best, most powerful spell that she could use, they would win so easily and simply. He suddenly appeared before them and, taking a quick look at everyone, said that he came as quickly as he could, but, apparently, they managed just fine without his help. Turning to the exhausted girl, he firmly stated that it was finally over for the 6 saints. Then the girl asked with some doubt if she could ask him just one question. How did he manage to kill that huge dragon battle monster that specialized in endless regeneration in 3 whole days and 3 nights? To which he, agreeing with her question, calmly replied that if it was just a battle of endurance, he would never have been able to defeat it. He concluded his thought by saying that this was why he just ate it. He also added that the power she possessed was truly enormous, and it seemed that she had sacrificed a lot for it. To this, the girl calmly replied that there was nothing to worry about, since she was not even on the side of the people. The queen asked in surprise if she was an elf, since they were in alliance with the people. To this she continued that she had nothing in common with them, causing even more surprise and confusion in the queen. As soon as they saw that her skin had noticeably darkened, the queen asked in surprise if she had been a dark elf all this time. To this, she, coughing up blood, smilingly corrected that she had been the first dark elf, and thought that now was the time to tell them a very old and important story. The story began with the fact that, a long time ago, in ancient times, there was a clan that worshipped the mother goddess in the heart of the forest, and lived directly in this forest, calling themselves elves. Soon a real genius was born, who was given the name Jiria. At a very early age, her knowledge already significantly surpassed the knowledge of the elders, and then she began to actively develop settlement after settlement. After that, their people began to grow rapidly, and the elves completely immersed themselves in the deep study of technology and new knowledge, and she was the one who headed this entire important process. From the ends of the earth to the bottom of the sea, they studied absolutely everything they could. But the elves wanted more and more knowledge, wanting to reach the very end. The knowledge steadily accumulated, and they seemed to be getting closer and closer to their goal. Every step led them to inevitable destruction. Looking at yet another elf, inspired by his newfound knowledge of the creators, she realized with horror. Some supernatural entity seemed to live in the world, waging countless wars, and this entity could very well be closely connected to their mother goddess. One of the elves shared with them that he had noticed a strange and alarming decline in population that had occurred in the past. He claimed that if they carefully looked into the events of the past, they would be able to successfully solve all the problems that were happening now. She replied that perhaps in the past, the census had not been so well developed, and the records could have been very vague and not match their current data. Whereas the elf said that was not the case and was just about to explain in detail how the series of strange incidents were connected, when suddenly the mother goddess herself fell from the sky. The mother goddess suddenly appeared with a blinding bolt of lightning, leaving the girl completely dumbfounded, not understanding what had just happened. While step by step, carefully examining their lair, they declared that greed and arrogance had gone too far in their dangerous quest, and it must be destroyed immediately. It was the first hero, the apostle of the goddess Coleman, from the first generation of heroes, who proposed to do as the goddess commanded them. And Eris from the first generation of heroes, walking side by side with him in heavy armor, completely agreed with him. He lit a blazing flame of sin in his hand, and they shouted that they would destroy absolutely everything here. While his comrade, in an instant, while dealing heavy damage to the rooftops, explained that this was just a mark, and this was the beginning of the hunt for the so-called colored elves. Looking at the girl who was overcome with fear, he declared that he would call them dark, and pointing his sharp longsword, he added that she would be the first to fall. But the girl suddenly disappeared from sight, and then his comrade, angry, called him an idiot because now they would have to catch them one by one, and ordered him to immediately control himself. In an instant, absolutely everything was taken from the elves, and those who tried to resist were killed one by one, and they all had to split up and flee. Then she made the difficult decision to go into a very long sleep, to completely throw off her persistent pursuers. Her body completely stopped growing, and she waited for a very long time. So much time passed that even the hard stones turned into small lumps of sand. All her companions had long since died and decomposed without a trace, and soon she was forcibly pulled out of this state. The apostle, standing before the bowed girl, said that from that time there were survivors and left their stubborn offspring, and they would need her help, since she, as one of them, would very easily find their secret places. He commanded, having learned everything, to kill the offspring of his people, while the girl mentally screamed that he took absolutely everything from her, and that she would rather die than do this to her own people. He lit the flame of sin in his palm again and asked if she remembered it, reminding her that the fire had only affected those who had followed the tower. He could spread this mark to all elves, and so she could choose to either kill only the children of her companions or destroy all elves to end their line. Approaching the first person he met, he addressed her with a kind smile, noting that she must be a wandering elf and that they were very pleased to see her. He assumed that the path to them was not easy, and at that moment she began to cry from the overwhelming emotions. The sound of the wind rustled in the street, creating an eerie atmosphere. She stood in front of the crying baby and slowly took out her weapon, preparing for the terrible deed. Her eyes were full of unbearable pain and tears, and then, holding a knife in her hands, asking in a strangled voice why he had not died, and saying that he should finally die, she dealt several bloody blows to the defenseless baby. She stopped, her gaze fixed on the bloody, lifeless baby and her own blood-stained hands, shaking from what she had done. Grabbing the baby in her arms, she screamed with all her might, a piercing cry full of despair and pain, the echo of which spread throughout the area. And so, already closing her eyes before the inevitable death, she finished her tragic story by saying that it happens that even the most brilliant individuals are doomed to failure. Having flown too high, they burn up in the clouds without reaching their goal. She also added that the race of dark elves does not exist, and this phrase was popularized only later as a distinction. Then she asked if this was funny, to which the queen briefly, questioningly answered whether it seemed like she was laughing, and that there was absolutely nothing funny about it. The queen admitted that she hated her, but still would not laugh at her, because turning away from everyone, pretending to be cynical and trying to die with a crooked smile on her face, this is already enough to hate her to the depths of the soul. She continued that no matter what happened in the past, they will never forget what she did to them, and she is disgusting, but yet she forgives her despite all the evil she did. The girl, not believing what she heard, confusedly asked her again about her words about forgiving her after everything that had happened between them, whereas, tenderly embracing the girl, the queen replied that even after everything, it was very sad when a person cannot be forgiven, and she was the only one who would listen and forgive, not allowing her to die like this, all alone. And after the queen's words that everything was fine, the girl began to cry and, clinging to her, confessed that it had been very hard, and everyone who was dear to her had died, and she had not wanted to kill her comrades. And she screamed that she should have been the first to die, and that she should have died in agony, gradually losing consciousness. Under the girl's last broken pleas, asking not to leave her and calling herself stupid, the queen gently lowered her eyelids. She replied that it must have been very hard for the girl, and she was probably tired of it all. The queen added with a peaceful smile that she had now forgiven her for everything she had done. Carefully lowering the girl's head, the queen wished her to sleep peacefully and calmly. Moving forward, he reached the top of the slope and there received an important letter delivered by an unusual bird. He turned to the bird to tell the rulers that when the right time came, they would meet the primordial fire. He added that these words were also intended for the bird itself, because he was not just a man, but one of the 6 saints, Kazodius. The old man asked the hero what he wanted to hear from him at the moment. The hero replied that he was confident in the old man's vast knowledge, and wanted to learn the secrets of the world. To this, the old man asked in bewilderment whether the hero was talking about knowledge worth its weight in gold, or about the fact that half of the 6 saints were dead. The hero immediately asked whether the old man was one of the strongest among them. The old man laughed when he heard this question. He explained that the kingdom had long since ceased to control these lands, and that he himself was only fulfilling his duty, which was no secret at all. Heroes, in his opinion, always act based on the principle of here and now, and if this was all that the interlocutor wanted to hear, then he received his exhaustive answer. The old man concluded that this was all he could tell, and that further developments depended solely on the hero. The hero, however, wondered if this was really the whole answer, since he had not received any specifics or clarity. The grandfather also added that people are creatures with enormous potential, and he is not at all interested in a dog that only begs for food, so further conversations will be unnecessary and meaningless. But he will still do him one favor, because heroes are his sworn enemies. Unsheathing his amazingly long sword, the grandfather, instantly assuming a fighting stance, declared that there was no place for them in the world of men, never had been and never would be, and that it would be better for him to retreat immediately. He chopped the rock in half between him and the hero, to which, looking after him, he added that he would take him to the temple of the goddess, and he could ask all his questions there. Looking after the boy falling into the endless abyss, the old man said that he, a monster who abandoned people, should be very ashamed. After all, only those who rose from despair and overcame all difficulties are worthy of being called a true hero. Having fallen to the very bottom, the boy assumed that he had fallen very deep, since he could not see anything around him. Suddenly, a mysterious light caught his attention, and, curious about where it was leading, he decided to simply follow this light and see where it would lead him. Following the light, he thought that the old man's hostility was real, and a person who hated heroes should definitely know more than he did. As he continued to think about what they were trying to achieve, he also realized that he had previously been completely confident in himself and his actions, but now everything had collapsed in an instant. As he delved deeper into his thoughts about who the heroes, the swords of kings, and the messengers of the goddess were, he finally realized that they were not at all like the characters of fairy tales. He realized that real heroes are those who continue to move forward no matter what, and set an inspiring example for others. And courage is not just the absence of fear, but the strength of will that helps to overcome any difficulties. He must learn the truth, no matter how cruel it may be, because he is a hero who is responsible for his actions. His fall carried him further and further, straight into the blinding, alluring light. As soon as his feet touched solid ground, he found himself in a forbidden zone, in the very heart of absolute purgatory, a place where time seemed to stand still. He stood right in the middle of the Ark of the Covenant of the Goddess, an ancient shrine shrouded in mystery. An unknown voice spoke to him, claiming that stupidity could not be cured by death, and that there was no escape from it, for it was a kind of ritual. It ordered him to return home immediately, otherwise he would know unbearable suffering. The mysterious stranger in the robe continued, telling him not to ask unnecessary questions. He warned that if the hero left now, he would remain a hero, and asked him directly if he wanted to become a sinner, changing his fate forever. Frozen in surprise, the boy finally recognized the stranger in the cloak. It was Coleman Zickelden himself, the legendary first hero, whose name appears in every history book of the kingdom. His stone and bronze statues are countless, and his face even adorns the kingdom's coins, which speaks of his importance. He asked him if the rebellious hero Ares was his brother, and if his foolish brother had told him that he, too, wanted him to turn back. He asked where the decent, honest, and pious hero was, and if he wanted to incur the wrath of the goddess by causing her displeasure. The hero clenched his fist, filled with uncontrollable anger. He said that he was taught to believe and never doubt, but the world seemed to be out of order. Even after defeating the Demon King, 30% of the population continued to die every year, as before, for no apparent reason. He explained that after the goddess's blessing, famine, disease, and massacres and wars had ceased. But he said that before he knew it, 30% of the population had simply disappeared. And besides, the kingdom itself had a hand in these suspicious records, which was definitely an anomaly. He was sure that they were hiding something from them, and he needed to know what it was, and only then could he decide what was right and what was wrong. The only thing left were the demons, who were supposedly finished. So he conducted his own experiment. He took the village under his protection, completely clearing a 5-kilometer zone of all demons. But despite this, the mortality rate was still 30%, which was highly suspicious. And yet the royal ledgers strangely showed that most deaths were recorded as slain by a demon, even though there were no demons in the vicinity. Drawing his sword and instantly assuming a fighting stance, he concluded that even if he was the goddess's personal apostle, he would go as far as possible to reveal the truth. The mysterious first hero asked the boy why he thought he could defeat him, and told him not to get cocky, reminding him of his place. The youth rushed into battle, declaring that with the power given to him, he would be able to defeat any enemy who stood in his way. Looking into the distance at the endless sky where a lonely bird was soaring, he realized that it had finally happened, and the moment of truth had arrived. Holding a small bird in his huge hand, he ordered it to tell the rulers that the time has come, and the king is now with him, asking everyone to immediately gather under his command. Releasing it, he told it to go on its way, fulfilling its mission. He thought that their leaders had an extremely difficult task ahead of them, and it was not worth dumping everything on them at once, and he himself was too old for such a burden. Looking out the window, he solemnly announced that it was time to finally start physical training. He needed to help them with everything he could, because now any help, even the smallest, was important. The three-headed bird entered the gentleman's room with a laugh, greeting him and telling him that it was morning, to which he calmly replied, "Good morning." The three-headed bird continued by saying that she never thought she would be able to survive this, and that it all seemed like some kind of incredible dream, and that no words would be enough to express her deepest gratitude to him. The gentleman replied that it was only a war, and it was not only for him, but for all living beings. Besides, it was difficult to call it a full-fledged victory, rather a truce. He added, looking at the surviving villagers, that too much innocent blood had been spilled, to which the bird replied that without him, they would have killed them all anyway, and he would thank him again and again, endlessly. One of the subordinates suddenly rushed from afar to personally inform the Black Lord. There were uninvited guests at the main entrance who insistently demanded to meet with him. The subordinate determined at a glance that they were significantly different from ordinary visitors, and probably belonged to a powerful faction of the Demon King, capable of establishing complete control over the entire north. The gentleman asked his subordinate if these uninvited visitors had any wounded or weapons. The subordinate reported that no one had been hurt, but they had a large axe and ridiculous brass knuckles, to which the gentleman thoughtfully replied that he would soon come to them himself. The Black Lord apologetically asked the three-headed bird to temporarily stand guard at the main gate, and the bird urged the Lord to be extremely careful. At this time, an angry outburst of discontent was heard at the gate from those waiting, dissatisfied with the fact that the killer of the 6 saints was taking too long, and the arriving Lord apologized for making them wait. Before the Black Lord appeared the formidable Karen and the long-haired Luna, both from the Berserker clan, looking quite impressive. With a sly grin, she called the Black Lord the killer of the 6 saints, and said that the closest thing they had to a demon king was a mad skeleton. The Lord asked in surprise if that was really what they were calling him, and the little one next to him explained that it was just a rumor actively spread by the goblins. The gentleman then asked the new arrivals why they were standing at the main gate, and noted that after the recent battle, everyone was exhausted, the cremations were complete, and they did not need any additional problems or conflicts. When the Black Lord asked her to leave them alone, she responded with a firm and categorical refusal. She explained that all the leaders under their control had been gathered as witnesses, and that it was here that she would be crowned the new Demon King. She did not care at all that the Black Lord was weak or what situation he was in, since the main thing in this world is that there are both the weak and the strong, and everyone must know their place. And just as she was about to attack him, with all her fury, shouting that she would kill him and that he should prepare for battle, someone interrupted him and asked him to wait until he told a story. They both recognized this stranger, who addressed them by name, noting that they had not seen each other for a long time, and that the gentleman standing before them was very special. When the gentleman asked if they knew each other, the stranger replied that they could say so, and he would come to an agreement with them himself, after which, pointing to the Black Lord, he began to explain to the two that he was not just an elder, but a veteran compared to the others. They asked him in amazement about his words about the veteran, asking how this was possible, since at the very bottom were the messengers, in the center were the friends, and at the very top was the senpai. To this, the stranger replied that the level of the master was completely different and much higher. Waving his hands, he added that he didn't really know how to explain it, since he himself didn't understand how it worked, and they couldn't understand what level the gentleman was on, because he was too magnificent. To this, she replied that he himself didn't know what level he was on, to which the interlocutor indignantly said that this was to be expected from them. Looking at them from the side, the Black Lord only thought with interest about what they could be talking about, and that he felt uneasy when he listened to them. Meanwhile, the long-haired girl pulled out her weapon, to which her comrade asked what she was doing and what was wrong. She looked at them sternly and replied that they had not convinced her, because she was not one to be persuaded by sweet words. She then turned to the Black Lord, stating that she would test him, as she could not be deceived, and immediately launched into a battle dance. He turned to her worriedly, saying that he was serious. The Black Lord was a veteran, and she needed to be careful. Even if the evil gods blessed them that blades could never hurt them, she still needed to be more careful. Its impact is like an explosion, and many people have died from this weapon. She rushed into the attack, and her friend looked at her with inspiration. But in an instant, he cut Luna's axe in half and apologized if it was so dear to her. but she had started it first, so he suggested calling it a simple greeting. Taking up arms, the master only thought that he was not sure that this would convince them, and assumed that she would say something to that, throwing out phrases like, "kill him," or "there is no forgiveness for him," or that he urgently needed to take back his words. To the great surprise of the gentleman, instead of the expected reaction, she only asked if she could call him Big Brother. Her partner asked if this meant that she would now have a brother, to which the long-haired girl, calling her a fool, replied that if she was her sister, then she was his sister too. The egg jokingly noted that they now acknowledged him as an older brother, and now he had cute little sisters. After which she added that she was going to go and talk to the chieftains about the Demon King being her older brother now. The Black Lord warned them that if they wanted to become part of their team, they had to be aware of the current situation, because they only needed those who could share their suffering. He continued that they were no longer the same mighty army that had so easily defeated the Six Saints. They had suffered great irreparable losses, and it could hardly be called a true victory, since many had died in vain, and they had not even managed to properly hold the fortress they had won so dearly. In addition, after this grueling battle, they were in dire need of food, armor, and clothing. Another such final victory over the humans would lead to their complete and irreversible destruction, which he could not allow. And although they already had enough problems with people, now there were also demons, for which he had absolutely no time or resources. Pointing to the crying harpy child, he calmly asked her if she would like to try herself in a new role. After making sure that he was speaking to her, she carefully called the child. Getting his attention, she showed him her smiling face and asked him if he found it funny. Unfortunately, the baby's crying got louder, and she asked him, confused, not to cry, trying to calm him down. The other winged children surrounded her, wondering what had happened, why she was crying, and if she was okay. She, wiping away tears, stuttered, saying that her mother had never come, leaving her alone. The child introduced herself as Reno, and the other children praised her name, finding it very beautiful. Then she said, confused, that perhaps her mother had flown very far away, and she would have a long wait. The children smiled and asked her to wait with them, calling her little sister, and she smiled back and agreed. Then they handed her some candy and asked her to help herself, trying to cheer her up. The girl asked the Black Lord if he was mocking her by offering her such an unusual occupation. He answered in the negative and explained that he had experienced something similar, and his experience was exactly the same, full of pain and loss. He said that despite all his efforts, she continued to cry, but the harpy children came to her aid and instantly got her back on her feet, calming and supporting her. At that moment, he realized that he was not capable of taking care of even one child, and only thanks to everyone's support, he was finally able to live a real life. If they were looking for a cruel ruler, they should look elsewhere, because he was not one. He continued that he was not attracted to the role of a king who relied only on brute force. He was looking for a place where he could be useful to others, a place that would not have to be taken by force, but could be earned. To this, the egg remarked that strength and friendship were completely different things and could not be compared. The three-headed bird said with bewilderment that she thought there would be more of them, and even managed to miss the Black Lord, but was glad that a fight was avoided. The girl said that there was nothing difficult about it, and they decided that they would work for their brother, helping him in everything. Assuming that more factions would soon join them, the Black Lord called for a gathering of the chieftains. He declared that it was time for everyone to discuss what they would do next, in order to come up with a common plan. All the chieftains gradually arrived and gathered together, preparing for an important meeting. The Queen of Concealment, Al-Kharifa, arrived at the beginning of the meeting of the leaders, majestically entering the hall. He complimented her new outfit, saying that it was very beautiful and suited her. She smiled and asked if he really thought so, accepting his compliment. He noted that he was going to get her battle clothes, but now he saw that she was prepared for any situation. She replied that this was the reason she had ordered a new outfit from the Master of Innovations, and now she would not have to take her priceless crown to the battlefield, protecting it. She asked where his bones and fur had gone, noticing the changes in his appearance. He replied that there was a little secret about the dragon that he wasn't ready to reveal yet. Smiling, she said that apparently everyone was gathered, and suggested starting the meeting, because it would determine their future and destiny. When the three-headed bird reported that everyone was ready, the Black Lord expressed his deep gratitude to those present, and suggested that the meeting begin immediately to move on to important matters. He announced that the first item on the agenda was the joining of the Berserker faction, and asked who wished to speak first on the matter. One of the chieftains immediately stated that if the berserkers were willing to help, then they would give them their full support, and this was followed by unanimous approval and cheers from the other chieftains. The Black Lord noted the complete lack of objections, and moved on to the next important item on the agenda, their plans for the future, clarifying that there were two completely different opinions on this issue. The first proposal was to stay put, rebuild the castle, and greatly strengthen the armament at the suggestion of the people. The second was to go to the lands of the demons, to their powerful ruler, known as the Storm Lord. He stated that he had already received an invitation from the Lord of the Storm, and asked the chieftains for their honest opinion on how they should handle the situation. After that, the question was asked who wanted to speak first. The three-headed bird spoke first, stating that he thought they should leave, as there was no logical reason to stay where they were. The Black Lord countered that they could fight in this castle, and they would join them, as they had when they had defeated the Fire Lion. But the three-headed bird objected that war is not only about the strength of the troops, but also about a stable supply of food, as well as providing the people with everything they need, since all resources are already running out, and they cannot have a combat-ready army if they cannot feed it. He continued that even if they were to take resources from humans, the only thing they would be able to use was food, and most of the armor would have to be restored and recycled on a massive scale, which would take a lot of time and effort. No matter how much they strengthen the castle, they will become poorer and poorer, reaching a dead end with no way out. And if they want to recover, they need to enlist the Stormlord's help, and they need to think about their relationship with him. One of the chieftains agreed, noting that despite the victory over the Six Saints, there were forces that could not be underestimated, and he himself had to rebuild the castle. The queen, however, countered that one could not passively wait for problems to go away, and another chieftain added that there would be many more opponents next time. Just as the egg was about to voice its conclusion about the advantages of asylum seekers, someone's fist came down with a menacing thud and announced that he, too, had something to say. One of the berserkers said that a shelter is, of course, good, but if everyone moves from shelter to shelter, too many demons will accumulate, and then someone will be needed to unite everyone together, and the one she insists on is... She insisted on her sworn brother, the Black Lord. With redoubled force, she stated that his name was already widely known not only among demons, but also among humans. She also suggested that her brother pick a more intimidating nickname, changing it to Demon King, so that people would fear him just by hearing his name. This caused controversy among the chieftains, who, despite his magnificent list of accomplishments, felt that Demon King might be too much or too hasty. The three-headed bird supported her opinion, stating that after they had demonstrated their strength, the title of Demon King would be able to serve as a frightening factor. The queen admitted that the nickname Demon King sounded quite impressive. When asked what they thought, the other chieftains said that they had been attacked even when they were quiet, but despite the madness, the nickname sounded pretty good. The chieftains continued that, according to their information, the Stormlord was actively seeking candidates for the role of Demon Kings, which could bring them double benefits and be the beginning of an exciting adventure. To this, one of the berserkers proudly asked to agree that this was a good offer, and sounded very cool. At that moment, the goblin chieftain raised his hand, announcing that their faction was voting yes, and that Mr. Mad Skeleton was now considered one of their kind, Taraka. The goblin continued that now that their master was dead, his people would follow their master, and he fully supported this. The chieftains acknowledged that their master had killed 2 of the 6 saints and eaten a dragon, which was more than enough of a recommendation for his recognition. They added that without him they would not have survived, and although no one expected such a turn of events, this moment will be truly historic for their people. The three-headed bird was about to say that everything was decided, if he was not against it, when one of the berserkers declared that almost everyone had already agreed, and she did not see anyone who would be against it, and everything was finally decided when someone suddenly asked to wait. The gentleman stated that he was forced to reject their decision to make him the Demon King. The gentleman's statement plunged everyone into deep shock and amazement. Shocked, she asked what he said, shouting about whether he realized that the Demon King was chosen from the strongest and best. She wanted to become one herself, but refused, thinking that persuading others would be enough for her purposes. Crying, she asked him why he didn't want to be the Demon King, saying that she had spent her entire life on it and now she felt miserable. Her long-haired sister was deeply concerned about her condition. She added that he had become everything to her, and he shouldn't just give up, calling him terrible, but immediately apologized for what she said in the heat of the moment. The Demon King himself explained that the main reason for his refusal was that the Demon King could not defeat the heroes. Everyone had heard of them in fairy tales and legends, but few knew how things really were, what the harsh reality was. He added that this is because everyone who meets heroes inevitably dies. He witnessed all of this and assured that it is impossible to kill a hero. It is impossible. Moreover, the Demon King does not pose any danger to people, since they are focused on something else. She asked the master, confused, what he was going to do then, since the hero could still appear even without the Demon King. The Black Lord replied that he wanted to offer an alternative, namely a solution that already had a proven track record, since the empire that the 1,000-year-old Dark Lord had once built used this system. He added that the Demon King would not be a sole ruler. The old system, known as the 5 Kings and 10 Kings, was based on collective power. Each nation would have its own leader, each would do what they were best at, and all the rules would be enshrined in a code. Everyone would depend on each other, not on the king, and then they would definitely survive. He then proposed forming a demon guild. Everyone at the meeting was taken aback by the proposal to create a demon guild. There were various opinions. Some said they had never heard of such a thing, others said that this was how humans ruled, and asked if it would be useful. The worried queen noted the general skepticism and wondered about the next steps. The three-headed bird, in turn, noted that the real reason for the fears was not in the word guild itself, but in the complexity of organizing a demon council. He also added that their differences are nothing compared to humans, and it is not even a question of large sizes or different colors, but of the value that everyone shares, a goal that is an absolute guideline for everyone. Power is absolute, and it is a law of nature that cannot be resisted, and this is what they put above all else. And to conclude, he concluded that the top of all this is the Demon King, to whom everyone submits, because it is logical. During a crisis, everyone wants to see a strong ruler, and the coronation of the Demon King would give everyone this hope. He asked the master if he was right in his conclusion that this was what was troubling him, to which he replied that a good king leads his people and also raises his people from their knees. It was reasonable to expect that the title of Demon King would provide the people with a leader and maintain balance, but if there was no king, that would mean that he would not be able to die. He emphasized that a good king is quite difficult to replace, asking everyone what they would do, for example, if he died. After all, days, months, years would pass, and sooner or later a hero would definitely come and kill him. Because if everyone left everything to the king, the entire nation would perish. He added that decentralization should only happen after the creation of a monarchy, and warned that the enemy does not sleep, so they must play big, and then victory will be theirs. Egg thoughtfully asked that if they were leaving here, what did he think about the practice? The Black Lord asked him about practice, confused. He explained that it was about whether they could hold a meeting without him if everything fell apart. The Black Lord replied that he knew that it all seemed like a dream, but when he became the next Demon King, the guild would be without him, but there would still be hope. And when asked what he wanted, a guild, he briefly agreed and said that he needed to be alone now. The egg said that he would then tell them a quick story that would change the minds of those who disagreed. He was just about to begin when he noticed that the Black Lord was still there. Indignantly reminding him of his desire for privacy, he asked the Lord to leave. The Lord agreed and left, and the egg calmly said that now they could begin again, without outsiders. As he left, the master muttered that things were going well, even excellent. Slowly but surely, the Black Lord moved forward. With glee, he announced that he had given up being the Demon King. As he climbed higher and higher up the hill, he screamed louder and louder, letting out his emotions. He poured out all his feelings, screaming louder and louder, and then, falling to the ground, he thought with despair how much he really wanted to become the Demon King, but he could not do it. He thought that his plan would work 9 times out of 10, but now he would hardly be able to defeat the hero. Besides, he has neither the strength nor the ability to carry everyone along with him, and he does not want to repeat the previous mistakes, because in recent years the Demon King has already been defeated by the hero, and he believes that many will understand that he is the true king despite this. He also thought regretfully that he could have said everything if he had wanted to. But now he was forced to complain like a whiner, and he needed to be more patient so as not to upset others. In order to regain his strength, he needed to spread the word, regain his power, and continue on his way. Looking peacefully at the night sky, he admitted to himself that he didn't think it would be so difficult, and thought about what an ideal king should be like. Rolling up to him, the egg said that he had run too far, and everyone was looking for him. The master asked in surprise if they were finished, to which the egg replied to make him rejoice. The guild was created. Although some were quite dissatisfied, Yatanoel's talkativeness was very helpful as an active member of the team. Because he has an impressive stock of knowledge, he noted that this was a temporary group, but the council and faction leaders had done everything together. Each had chosen his own position in such a way that he now had a logistics manager, a senior assistant, and he himself was now a department head and a guild member with military authority and the right to an emergency council meeting. In his job title, he announced that his job title would now be, quote, Demon King. As a friend, he approached the Black Lord, sharing his theory. A true king is not one who can overthrow another, for power is a delusion that is not characteristic of a good ruler. Where others see a forest, a king will see a path. Where the water is muddy, a king will find a spring. He has already eliminated the old Demon King and become the king that everyone wants to see. He confidently concluded that the Demon King they all believed in was already here, and the rest was up to him. He expressed his faith in him and asked him to become the Demon King, promising to tell the whole world about it. However, he will be able to tell his name a little later. A few days later, the three-headed bird flew by asking if everyone was ready and told them to check everything again because they would not return here again. Flying higher and higher, he ordered the squad leaders to report the number of demons in the team and the supply group to inspect the cargo and not break the queue. Having reached the Demon King, he reported that he thought everything was now all right. And then the Demon King from above called everyone to attention and said that he would tell them this for the last time. He announced that they were leaving the fortress and retreating to the lands of the Stormlord. The journey would not be easy, especially with such a large group, but they would work together and see it through to the end. He added that the vanguard needed men who could fight. The giants should use their huge size to observe the situation, and the hardy ones should carry supplies. Children, the sick, and essential items are transported in separate columns. Harpies from above guard the columns, the queen, and the elves at all times. The search must always be carried out in shifts. He gleefully reminded them that they had already defeated half of the 6 saints, and that with their combined strength, anything was possible, he exclaimed, calling on them to go through all the difficulties together, to the cheers of the villagers. Pointing forward, they gave the command to move forward. The Demon King looked sympathetically at the old woman's legs, which were shaking from fatigue, and asked if everything was all right and if she would like to ride in the carriage. She refused, explaining that she did not want the children to walk. The old woman asked the Demon King if he minded if she went ahead, willing to sacrifice herself. She noted that she had never seen the children so worried. She also asked him what he was doing at the rear of the convoy, since he was a king and had to be escorted. He shouldn't be hiding where only old people were. She continued that when a fight started, they would serve as bait. The Demon King thought for a moment and replied that she had probably already noticed how old age brings many difficulties. To this, the old woman smirked and said that she would not be angry with him, because she had lived long enough, and the fall of an old tree gives light to new ones. The Demon King calmly explained to the old woman that they were all here because they were convinced that everything would be fine, so if something happened, she could run away without worrying about the others. He noticed her trembling and told her that she had nothing to worry about. The old woman laughed loudly, explaining that it was due to old age and that he was powerless, but she still praised him for his kindness and thanked him for his concern. Suddenly, his gaze fell on the falling harpy. Dead and wingless, she collapsed right at his feet, presenting a terrible sight. Above them, hovering in the air, a swordsman with bloody harpy wings was visible, clearly involved in what happened. The killer rushed straight towards the old woman, intending to strike. The Demon King managed to intercept her, protecting her from the deadly blow. He told her to save herself and to tell the others to retreat as far as possible to save their lives. Right in front of the mysterious enemy, dressed in a robe and holding a sword, he stood ready to fight. The mysterious swordsman said that he did not expect to see him alive, considering him a brother or something like that, But then he recognized the Demon King Ignis and mockingly emphasized that he had risen from the dead, and for this he must pay, hinting at retribution. The hero was hiding behind the mantle. The Demon King lowered his sword and offered to talk, avoiding unnecessary confrontation. The hero, confused, asked what he was planning, but the Demon King replied that, to his own surprise, he was not planning anything, and it was just a request. He got down on one knee and turned to the hero with a sincere request for help. Looking at the hero's astonished face, he reminded him of his previous fiery speeches about bonds and connections. He emphasized that demons were also not strangers to such concepts as family and compassion, and perhaps it would seem strange, but he no longer wished to fight, preferring a peaceful solution. He asked the hero if there was a demon capable of defeating him, and if they could pose a threat at all. The demons understand that they are responsible for the deaths of the 6 saints, but if the humans want revenge, they can take his head in exchange for peace for the rest, offering themselves as a sacrifice. The hero asked the Demon King if he had decided to sacrifice himself, and noticed that he had changed, as if he were facing a completely different demon. But it didn't matter, because he intended to destroy everyone. Women, children, old people, everyone without exception, regardless of their harmlessness, and declared that not a single demon would leave, they would all be destroyed. The Demon King, rising from his knees, replied that he too had noticed a change in the hero, for the hero he knew was now dead. To this, the hero declared that there were no more heroes, immediately correcting himself that, more accurately, there had never been any in this world, and commanded the demon to prepare for his inevitable death. He slowly rose and, saying that since there were no heroes left, took up his sword, preparing for battle. In that case, he stated, as a Demon King, he could unleash his full potential and show his true power. Everyone was alarmed, feeling uneasy and foreboding. When one of the berserkers asked where he was going, since their brother was attacked, he replied that the situation was quite unexpected, and so he would go look around to understand what was happening. Analyzing the difference in strength, the Demon King planned to use every advantage he had, otherwise he was doomed to defeat. He saw that the length of the hero's sword was twice his body, which was an obvious, extremely dangerous advantage for the enemy. He reminded himself that the key to this battle was to not be outflanked, to be constantly on guard, and to keep his distance to avoid a fatal blow. Activating chaos magic, the Demon King began to attack the endless branches, trying to restrain the hero. The hero easily cut off the branches and rushed towards him, steadily reducing the distance. Realizing that the attack of the endless branches was too weak and ineffective, the Demon King increased his attacks on the hero, but he continued to move forward steadily, without slowing down. Like a huge storm of light, the Demon King's attack incinerated everything in its path, but the hero stood firm, enduring the entire onslaught. Time after time, the Black Lord struck, trying to close the distance and get closer to his opponent. Using 2 huge blades, he put them right to the hero's neck, trying to finish the fight. However, with one swing of his sword, the hero crushed his blades and, looking straight into the eyes, asked the Demon King if everything was going as he had planned, mocking his plan. He shouted that he would stop him and struck again with his sword, but the hero successfully blocked the attack, repelling the assault. The Demon King was clearly aiming to not let the hero get any closer, and to delay him for at least a second to buy time. But the hero quietly said that it was enough, and, telling him to die, he aimed his fist straight at the Demon King, dealing a crushing blow. A powerful punch landed straight at the Demon King. The blow sent the Demon King flying a considerable distance. As he lay on the ground, he reflected that he had foreseen this outcome, but he did not regret the decision he had made, understanding its consequences. The Demon King also noticed that, in addition to the initial predetermined failure, the hero's blow affected the internal organs rather than the outer shell, which was quite unusual. Declaring that it was time to end this, the hero attacked the Demon King with King Gingrald's sword, seeking to end the fight. All his concentration was directed towards the attack. The hero was preparing for the decisive blow that would put an end to everything. As the hero rushed straight towards him, the Demon King assumed a fighting stance, preparing to defend himself, and trying to anticipate his opponent's next move. But after just a few moments, the hero found himself right in front of the Demon King, closing the distance in the blink of an eye. The formidable Demon King's massive sword split in two, unable to withstand the onslaught. After the defeated Demon King collapsed, the hero quietly whispered his intention to find his herd, musing that due to the numerous cloaking spells, tracking them down would be much more difficult than he had imagined. While the hero was rapidly moving forward, determined to destroy everyone this time, the Demon King was sinking deeper and deeper. As soon as the hero put on his robe, a strange sound from behind him caught his attention, making him wary. As the water began to swirl, forming a powerful whirlwind, the hero realized that the Demon King was still alive and breathing, despite the wounds he had suffered. The entire area was enveloped in a powerful explosion that shook everything around. A huge explosion raised the water and it rained down, leaving the hero soaking wet. From the depths of the shadows, the silhouette of the Demon King emerged, appearing before him once again. Once again, the Black Lord stood before him, full of determination. The hero stated that the Demon King had hidden a trump card and that everything remained the same, and then ordered him to die, repeating his intention. However, the hero noticed a sharp increase in his enemy's speed, wondering how it was achieved. At that moment, the Demon King used chaos magic. He used the eternal whip attack, raining it down on the enemy. But the hero deftly managed to evade the military whips. With one blow, he threw the hero a considerable distance away. The hero suddenly realized that the situation was much more serious. The demon had not simply hidden its true capabilities. It had absorbed the power of his White King's sword. He remembered hearing about the Demon King's ability to imitate the Fire Lion's power, but he guessed that something else was involved. He also remembered that the Demon King had once been mistaken for a flame wielder. His very essence was chaos magic, which destroyed the order and laws of nature, returning disorder to the world, and the White King's sword also destroyed everything to the state of pure magic, before it had even been formed. The hero wondered if the demon had absorbed his magic as well. If so, the Demon King would be able to transcend the ordinary, because chaos is not just a type of magic, it can be used to change the flow of time, which is beyond comprehension in itself. And then the question arose, is there someone behind the Demon King, like those who stand behind the heroes? The tension in the fight grew, and the hero desperately resisted. The hero told the demon that no matter how much energy he absorbed, it did not mean victory, because even a bucket full of water could not put out a huge fire. The blows followed one after another, the attacks alternated, and the swords continued to ring in the fight. The demon let out a piercing scream from the hero's next blow, refusing to give up. Having grabbed the hero, the demon tried to strike him with what was supposed to be the last blow. However, at that very moment, the Demon King's weapon crumbled into tiny pieces. The hero noticed that the Demon King's vessel had long been broken. Approaching the demon, he said that this time he would definitely finish him off. The prince said that everything happened exactly as it had then, with the only difference that this time he would not survive. However, the demon began asking the hero where he was and where he had disappeared to, demanding that he return and continue the fight. He insisted that he knew the hero was somewhere nearby, despite the fact that he was standing right in front of him. Quietly asking the hero to finish him off, the demon received in response the assurance that the hero would fulfill his wish and finish him off. However, when the hero was about to deliver the decisive blow, a voice was heard that said that there was no need to rush and that their search was not easy. The stranger who appeared clarified that he had to teleport across the entire continent, since the tracks were very well hidden. The hero asked him if he was the only one among them. The stranger answered in the negative and explained that he was a little different from them, but was his subordinate both now and in the past. The Demon King's subordinate ordered the hero to stop and let his master go. As soon as the king came to his senses, he recognized his voice and shouted at him to run, warning him that this was no ordinary man but a hero, to which the subordinate laconically replied that he knew it. The hero asked him if he was a fire spirit, adding that he had heard that they preferred a slender body. To this he replied that his body was created specifically for this purpose. The hero asked if this body was created to intimidate, and immediately added that any attempts to intimidate him were futile. In response, the subordinate stated that he was warning the hero for the first and last time. He urged the hero to retreat, hinting that if he stepped aside, perhaps he would be spared. Grasping the hero's sword with just his fingers, he irritably reminded the hero that he was talking to him and asked him not to tempt his fate. Calling the hero a baby, he threw him away with astonishing ease, along with his tiny sword. The hero, feeling confusion and pain, could not comprehend what had happened. He informed the Demon King that the hero would remain motionless for a while longer and that a healer would be arriving soon. Just as the Demon King was about to say something, The subordinate continued that there might be some confusion, but that it was nothing to worry about. He lifted him up carefully and addressed him as his king. The king, surprised, reminded him that his enemy was a hero, and the hero immediately asked who he was. He stated that he wanted the king to remember his true identity and the mission that had been entrusted to him, showing the ring from his cane, whose seal he had weakened in an attempt to go as far as possible. Turning to the king, he added that he left the matter to him. He explained that they intended to send him vivid thoughts based on their memories. But he also warned of the main problem with this method. The king would be torn between the present and the past, as if his mind were inhabiting another body, and he might end up fighting for control of his consciousness, but they would be of no help. Suddenly, he called out sharply to the king, warning him that the hero had risen. Having risen to his feet again, the hero gathered all his strength and prepared himself for the decisive battle. Standing right in front of him again, he declared that he didn't care how strong he was. He would kill them both and end the age of heroes. After questioning him about his plans to kill them, the king's subordinate asked why the hero thought it would make a difference, even if he used the power he had been given, when the only thing he was capable of was stupidity. He offered to teach him a little lesson. As the first officer and the spirit king of the primordial fire, he was ready to teach him a lesson the hero would never forget. He stood proudly before the hero, and his power was felt in every corner of the atmosphere, penetrating it to its very foundations. However, the hero did not lose heart and again grabbed his sword, preparing for a new clash. The hero pierced the first officer with his sword. However, the officer, remaining absolutely calm, replied that the severed hand was only a fake, designed to hide his true power, which had to be constantly restrained. The officer added that excess energy was released through these hands, but now he was determined. He did not care what the hero did, because he would not even be able to scratch him, let alone cause serious harm. The officer said that the hero had no idea how hard it was to control the power pouring out of him. Sometimes even the words sounded different, distorted by the power. And what a feeling it was to watch such a worthless person gleefully destroying his own people and abandoning those who begged for help, being betrayed. He repeated again that he had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. When the hero struck the officer with just one blow, he felt a sharp pain pierce his body. The officer asked him how his strength tasted, and if he was ashamed of his cowardly behavior. An elegant girl suddenly appeared on the battlefield, noting that the king from the south looked different from what was described, and that she had been warned of a hero's arrival. Then, noticing the demon king, she added in surprise that she did not expect to see him in such a state again, and that the great duke was very proud of him, despite the current circumstances. With a proud smile, she threw aside pleasantries and announced that she had arrived first, anticipating the arrival of the others. After apologizing for what was happening, the officer informed her of the seriousness of the situation and asked if he could begin treatment immediately. She, reminding him that she was the Lord of the North, agreed. The Lady of the North warmly assured him that she would take care of him. With a smile, she informed him that she knew about his memory loss, but for now he was safe because she was on his side. She assured him that no one would dare harm him now, and began to heal the king. When the officer asked what was going on, she said with annoyance that it was hard to believe how weakened the demon king had become, to the point that she even thought he was a fake. And that, she said, was the burden they had placed on him. The king of the 9 dust dragons joined them from the Western Empire, adding that it wasn't worth it. He assumed that the fact that they were all there meant that the king had returned. To this, the officer replied that, having been hiding in the backwoods of different parts of the country, not only the heroes but also the apostles had begun to move. The dragon, calling the kings cowards, declared that the final battle was coming. To which the officer replied that this was precisely why the Grand Duke had asked for the impossible. Appearing just as silently and suddenly, he reminded her of her vow not to burden him. He noted that they had been gathering strength, but things had turned out differently than planned, since it was originally assumed that in his country they would not rush with preparations. Because of this, he was very ashamed, and he apologized to the Grand Duke. These were the words of the Storm Lord who appeared. The Storm Lord materialized a huge staircase in front of them with a wave of his hands. Noticing that the king was almost healthy, the officer suggested working on his lost memories, and asked him to trust the king, even if it seemed strange. He emphasized that the dormant memories were his true power, and they still wanted him to find it. Others supported him, saying that their master was the only hope for his return, and he would surely fight back against the heroes. The Demon King replied that he didn't know why, but he didn't doubt them since they believed in him so much. He said that he is ready to go through all obstacles as the Demon King that they believe in. The officer promised a spectacular spectacle, both in the past and in the future, and asked the king to prepare himself. The king replied that he was ready, and they could begin. They told him to remember everything and to follow his destiny steadfastly in order to fulfill the mission entrusted to him. Having thanked everyone whose names he did not know, the king noted that the next time they would meet, they would be as friends, not as enemies. Their goal was an ideal world, a world divided into black and white. In this world, they, the whites, did not need anyone else, striving to become the only absolute. Looking at them with disdain, they were convinced that they did not need them and that they were not worth paying attention to. Envy, anger, pride, all of this was sinful to them. They did not want the fallen to be with them, polluting their purity. He found himself in the midst of a dozen wounded bodies. The sight was terrifying. Ignis left behind piles of corpses, far more than rumor had suggested. He explained that, according to legend, those who were eaten alive by a six-eyed monster ended up here. He was surprised to see that the Demon King was huge, twice his size, and looked very strong. Turning to the six-eyed one, he asked for a favor, noting that he was also out of his mind, and that he needed a reliable partner for his plans. When the Demon King asked who he was, he replied that he was going to do something great, but now he is a nobody who has lost his purpose. He explained that he dreamed of building an empire and creating something great, and then suggested that they grab a bite to eat so they could rest a bit. The Demon King asked if he was the local madman, and added that he had no reason to linger there any longer, as he was in a hurry. The stranger said that being crazy was wonderful, because it allowed one to do crazy but very romantic things. The Demon King cut him off abruptly, telling him to shut up, but the stranger continued that if he ended up in this place, everything would end, hinting at a destructive force. The Demon King declared that the invasion of his territory had brought his wrath upon the stranger, and that this was his fate. However, the stranger responded by calling the talk of fate complete nonsense, insisting that their presence here was not due to the influence of fate or destiny. His interlocutor turned out to be a formidable and incredibly strong Demon King. His gaze was fixed on the stranger, studying him with undisguised interest. He crept up from behind with lightning speed and screamed at the top of his lungs after him. He made a leap, intending to pounce, but with one movement of his hand, he threw the Demon King away and ordered him to calm down, noting that they did not need to fight, and it was too tiring. The black gentleman asked irritably about the call to calm down and threatened death. In response, the stranger asked the reason for such irascibility and how he could harm him, since he was not his enemy. The stranger continued, pointing out that the piles of corpses had already been there before he arrived. He offered to tell the Demon King the reason for his misfortunes. The Demon King explained that it was because of a deep anger seething within him that enraged him to no end. The stranger asked why this was so and whether it could possibly give him pleasure, but the Demon King snapped that it was unthinkable. The black gentleman cried out that he would destroy him to curb his anger. However, the stranger asked if that would solve the problem, since there were already mountains of bodies lying around. The Demon King stated that they are here to kill him, and this really pisses him off. He thinks that most people would be scared of this, but it makes him furious. The stranger noted that the Black Lord believed that violence could solve his problems, which was certainly very bad. He expressed his desire to grant him salvation and suggested that the Demon King might be suffering from constant frustration. The black gentleman pushed him away, ordering him not to touch. The stranger responded by telling him to stop attacking, wondering why he was so angry. The Demon King noted the strange behavior of the stranger, devoid of any hostility, and ordered him to return to where he came from. The stranger objected that he would not leave, because he was going to make the Demon King his partner so that he could help him fulfill his dream. The stranger said that first he needed to relieve stress, and suggested that the Demon King trust him, tell him about all his mental anguish, assuring him that he believed in him and that he would cope. The Demon King retorted that his only concern now was the stranger's presence. The stranger then suggested changing the subject and asked to talk about his creator. The king asked him what he wanted to hear. He was told that the more information he could give, the better, and then he would be able to understand what was going on in his head. The Demon King shared that he had not seen his parents for as long as he could remember, and all he could remember was the pitch darkness that enveloped him. He recalled how he felt abandoned, persecuted by the world, a terrible monster who was hated and called sin. He was forced to constantly run, to yearn, and to lose his mind from hunger. However, he had something more valuable than a piece of meat. He remembered how tightly he clutched a piece of soft fabric. What followed was only murders, death, wars unfolding before his eyes, and the fire of his hatred growing ever stronger. The stranger suggested that the memories of hunger indicated that the Demon King was seeking love and affection. However, he clarified what love was, explaining it as a spiritual concept that each person perceives individually and often feels through interactions with others. The stranger continued that love is a kind of positive addiction, and its lack gives rise to malice and alienation in beings. However, he also noted that any person in his environment could become a source of this love, and there is nothing unusual about it. The Demon King asked the stranger to show him what love was, doubting that it could satiate him, but promising to listen to him in the future if it did help. The stranger responded by saying that the Demon King could unleash his beast love, and he would definitely like it. The stranger immediately began to prepare food to feed his newfound comrade. The stranger took care of a cozy night's lodging for the Dark Lord. He wrapped him up and put him to sleep. However, when the Demon King woke up, he discovered that the stranger was gone. Only a trace remained. At this time, he encountered two armed hunters who tried to explain their visit by wanting to kill the six-eyed monster that lived here. However, he objected that there was no such monster here, but only a child with deep mental wounds. The hunters cried out that if he had seen the little one, whose scars were probably from the six-eyed one, he should let them pass. The stranger replied that people who have been hurt do the same without thinking, but this only harms both parties, bringing nothing but suffering. He asked them to leave. The stranger continued, acknowledging their good intentions, but stressed that it was people like them who had turned the Demon King into a monster. He stated his intention to change him, as he had suffered the most, and added that they themselves still had a chance to become kinder. The stranger offered them money if their visit was due to financial need, and allowed them to spread rumors that they had killed him if they wanted fame. However, he sternly warned them never to return, threatening that if they did, they would encounter a real monster. He said they would have to look into the very depths of the abyss of horror. One of the hunters, overcome with terror, exclaimed that the stranger had red eyes like rivers of blood and that black rain was pouring around him, after which he collapsed unconscious, foaming at the mouth. The second hunter, worried, asked what he had done to his comrade and begged him to stop the torment. The stranger made a mental note that perhaps he shouldn't have shown them that. Later, when he met the Demon King, he apologized if he had scared him. Looking at the stranger, the Demon King wondered if he was really like him. He sighed heavily and asked the Demon King if he wanted to hear his story, and began by saying that he didn't remember his parents, and that he had always looked like this for as long as he could remember. Like the Demon King, he had special powers, and the first time he met another demon was on a night like this. After thinking a little about where to start, he started with the fact that he was perfect from birth. No knowledge, no growth, and came into this world with everything he needed right away. The stranger continued that he possessed all knowledge, from magic and blacksmithing to geometry and psychology, and already at that moment he realized that this was not normal. Noticing that fortunately he also had a sense of duty, he thought about whether it was worth sharing this knowledge. Having shared it with the first people he met, they accepted it and began to develop, from hunting to agriculture, from wood to stone, from stone to iron, and so a whole civilization appeared. Settlements grew into cities, people lit fires, built their own states, passed laws, and prospered. A religion formed around him, and he was worshipped as a god, while he himself, striving for further development, planned an expedition. He was absent from the country for several years, and this was to lead to the development of metallurgy and steam industry, which could bring many rare minerals and rich resources. Therefore, he wrote a book that told how to govern the country and develop it, and the priests, calling it the Bible, read it. The expedition ended several years later as planned. However, after returning from the expedition, only ruins awaited him. When he asked about what had happened, the priest explained that soon after their departure, a conflict broke out in the country between the church and the royal nobility. All sides declared the Bible to be an absolute sacred thing and did not question it, but at the same time each interpreted it in their own way. They relied too much on God and, as a result, were unable to solve the problems themselves due to the differences in interpretation growing day by day as the conflict between the two factions escalated. On the day the king was killed, the war began, and the book did not give right or wrong answers. Because the book had no soul, it no longer mattered how true the book was. When readers are blind, neither reason nor strength can overcome stupidity, and everything loses its meaning. The whole country fell in an instant, and he realized that he was wrong, and that higher knowledge turned out to be not a gift, but a curse. He came to the conclusion that knowledge is wisdom that makes life easier, but even the deepest wisdom is meaningless if it does not come from the heart. Only when wisdom has a heart does it become truth, and even strength without a heart will not lead to unlimited power. So he decided that he wanted to create a country where beings could communicate heart to heart. He realized that if deep wisdom and powerful strength could come together, then a new world could certainly be built. His aspiration was a new world, unattainable alone, and a country that could not be built without someone's help. He said that this time he wanted to build an ideal country and, holding out his hand, asked if he would help him. The Demon King said he didn't understand what he was talking about and shared that he wanted to get out of there and find out. Shaking hands with the Demon King and calling him a friend, he said that he looked forward to their work together. The Demon King said that he still didn't understand who he was or where he came from, to which his friend replied that he didn't know either, but stated that there was no force so much stronger that it was beyond their understanding. Looking into the distance, they assumed that someone or something knew well what was happening in the world now, and therefore perhaps brought them together. He clarified that this was more about the future than the present, and suggested that the Demon King go in search of people who could build their country. They must build a 1,000-year empire with vast territories and wise rulers, for which they will need outstanding commanders, strong and wise. The first candidate was Goshuma Agni, the keeper of the primordial fire. The second was Bramd Gloriana Mary Elizabeth, the true ancestor. The third was Graham Galadroa, the 9th king of the Dust Dragons, and the last was the Stormlord. They decided to go to the nearest city, Diaz, the capital of the volcanoes, to meet with the king of the Ifrits. He approached the Dragon King with a proposal for a task, a challenge of sorts. As a protective amulet, he would give him bracelets of black thorns, so strong that they could not be broken even by his strength, and the thorns on them were very sharp. He also asked the Dragon King to consider how his own magic interacted with the bracelet so that he could unlock its full potential. He also added that, if he needed time, he could wait. To which the Demon King chuckled and said that it was time to issue the challenge and get down to business. Although the Demon King tried his best, he could not control it and eventually recognized the stranger's abilities. It would take him longer to master them, but he knew that mindless control was dangerous. He said that magic allows one to use it, but at the same time it penetrates the ordinary world, thereby causing various catastrophes, such as being weighed down into abysses even deeper than the magical world. As a result, even the power of the stars, which could originally only be accessed astrologically, can be used by him as celestial magic. However, he warned that the star's power was too great to control. One day, if a fallen star were destroyed, it could wipe out an entire continent. He also emphasized that having power was one thing, but being able to control it was quite another. Suddenly, guards appeared before them, ordering them to stand still and declaring that this was the kingdom of the Ifrits. The guard warned them that they would not pass without a pass, pointing at the Demon King, especially him, because he smelled of death. He added that the lands of the Great King were not suitable for the likes of him, and, reminding them that no one had invited them, told them to leave. When the king's friend asked what the pass was, the guard, holding the flaming stone in his hands, showed it, noting that it had patterns and magic that were cast on it, and that they were so intricate and unique that they could not be forged. After lightly analyzing the material, structure, and ancient writing of the stone from the primordial fire, they handed the 2 stones to the guard. The guard examined them for a long time, doubting, but still declared that it was simply a very high-quality fake. However, another guard interrupted him and said that the king had become interested and ordered them to pass through, asking to see their passes. The Demon King's friend asked in confusion what his mistake was, since he was confident in the quality of his fakes, to which the guard replied that the passes were too perfect, and the craftsmen capable of creating such things had long since disappeared. The guards hurried them, asking them not to keep the king waiting, and particularly noted the interest in the beast, that is, the Demon King. The Demon King inquired about the reason for such attention, to which his friend suggested that it was due to his fame as a six-eyed monster, and perhaps they had an old score to settle. The Demon King retorted that he had not attacked him and did not understand the reason for such interest. His friend suggested that the king perhaps wished to see his true nature, noting that the Demon King was lucky in any case. The king noted that they had covered a considerable distance. Before them stood a magical beast, the master of the Mountain of Corpses, the king of the Ifrits, who controlled the primordial fire. Greeting them, he addressed them as servants of the true and eternal queen of the ancestors. While the Demon King was still perplexed, his friend turned to him and announced that he was the first on his list of potential commanders, and that he wanted the head of the 9th Dust Dragon King. The king explained that due to the war between the Dragon King and the true ancestors, the Dragon King's army, which had seemed to be the winner, had driven itself into a stalemate, and for many years now, both sides have been in absolute balance. The king added that they had heard rumors that the Battle of Kings was about to end, and the alliance was about to form several alliances to ensure their victory. Just the other day, the Dragon King's messenger approached him with an offer of an alliance, but they suddenly appeared, and the king asked what the queen had brought him, the king of the Ifrits. The Demon King's friend objected, saying that they had no right to call themselves kings, since the true king himself spoke for his people. He warned that an alliance with them would only bring more trouble, since its price was the suffering of other kings. To this, the Ifrit king asked if he had come to negotiate or threaten, reminding them that their army had truly strong warriors. Irritated, he asked if he dared to threaten him, the Lord of Corpse Mountain and the six-eyed monster, and then asked if they were both being too arrogant for such threats. However, one of the subordinates tried to reason with the king, reminding him that they were in a palace. Then, addressing the Demon King as the six-eyed one, he declared that he was the real monster and suggested that they play a game to find out who was stronger. A three-headed monster attacked the Demon King. However, the Demon King sent the monster flying with one powerful blow. The Demon King stated that the Ifrit King had clearly overestimated his monster's strength, as he had won. He lamented that he should have been less harsh, as he had not expected such weakness from his opponent. The king of the Ifriti declared that he would have to intervene. He strengthened the monster with the flames of madness and set it on the enemy again. The king explained that fire had various properties. It could strengthen hearts and make blood boil, removing all restrictions. The flame of madness, burning out all the blood, filled the heart of the beast. The monster rushed towards the Demon King, but he only watched imperturbably as its power increased. He felt no strength, no intelligence, and at that moment only one thing came to his mind. With one precise blow, he cut off one of the heads of the three-headed monster. He realized that the flames were only in one head, and the monster's chances of survival were unlikely, to which his friend, remembering the words about sacrificing a little for the sake of a greater, declared that he would take care of the dog, praising the Demon King for doing a good job with his bracelets. The Demon King told the Ifrit King that if he wanted to take them, he should come to them, warning that they would talk about kings later, and now they would have to talk seriously. The Ifrit King accepted the challenge, setting a condition. If he won, the Demon King would become his property. He then ordered them to gaze intently at the oldest and most terrible of the primordial fires, offering a change of scenery after the Battle of Kings. He ordered the Demon King to be proud, for in the arena where many heroes had fallen, on a starry night, he would demonstrate why he was the true king.